After a young priest arrives on an isolated island, supernatural events, incredible miracles, and frightening omens begin to occur. And it turns out that all of this is caused by the blood of an angel, which turns people who drink it into demons. Riley Flynn looks in horror at the girl hit by his car. The man realizes he is guilty because he was drunk, but there is nothing he can do about it. Later, the man freely admits his guilt and goes to prison, where every night before going to sleep he sees the girl he killed. 4 years have passed. Riley's mother, Annie, eagerly awaits his son's arrival in his homeland, a fishing village on Crockett Island off the coast of Washington state, and raises her youngest son, Warren, forbidding him to go to the peat bogs. But the boy wouldn't listen to her lecturing, and having met his friends, he goes to the forbidden place because no one will prevent the young people there from trying illegal substances and having a great time. They buy the stuff from a local dealer and go to the peat bogs. On the way, the guys stop at the house where Lisa lives. The girl cannot walk. She refuses the offered treat, and the trio goes on their way. At this time, a young man with a huge box locked with padlocks enters the door of the local priest's house. The boys get into a boat and make their way to the far shore of the island. It's already dark, so when they hear a sound of huge wings, the boys mistake them for a giant heron taking off. The peat bogs are also teeming with stray cats that were brought here from the mainland, and they feed on old remains because up until the 1920s people buried their dead right in the yards. And now, when the peat bogs get flooded, those remains resurface. Warren knows this because after storms, all this creepiness washes ashore where their house stands. The boys settle in their usual spot, and after taking some revelatory substances, start telling tales about local ghosts. At that moment, loud cat cries are heard from the bushes, and Warren, shining his flashlight in that direction, sees 2 burning eyes following them. But they immediately disappear, and the boy forgets about the incident. In the morning, Riley arrives on the island. Annie meets her son and apologizes for his father and younger brother who could not meet him because they were out fishing. Meanwhile, the ferry is met by a zealous parishioner, Bev Keane, who is concerned about the long absence of Father Pruitt, but the priest is not on the ferry. Meanwhile, teacher Erin Grin undergoes an ultrasound examination of the unborn child, and the doctor assures her that there is nothing wrong with the baby. The women pay attention to Riley, from which they are distracted by the appearance of the doctor's elderly mother who suffers from dementia. Annie introduces her son to the new sheriff, and the latter greets the boy. The sheriff then wakes up the only detainee, local alcoholic Joe, who came running in the night screaming that a huge albatross was chasing him. The sheriff releases sobered-up Joe, and he walks out to his dog, who has been waiting for his master at the exit all night. Bev, who is passing by, is indignant. The dog is dangerous, it could attack, but they don't listen to her. Meanwhile, Riley and Annie reach their house. The woman shares her problems. There has been an oil spill accident, and now fishermen can only catch fish according to their quota. Naturally, this causes money problems. Previously, hundreds of families lived on the island, but now there are only dozens left. In the meantime, there is a meeting at the school because a storm is coming to the island very soon, and it is necessary to make sure the shelter is ready. The new sheriff calls for it to be equipped in the school, but Bev objects. Everything has been ready in the church for a long time, and there is no need to change anything. All members of the Flynn family finally get together for dinner. Riley informs them that he has to travel to the mainland to check in with the Alcoholics Anonymous, which is one of the conditions for his release. Warren talks about the new teacher, a daughter of an ex. Riley perks up. Is Erin really back on the island? And learns of her pregnancy. Annie announces that their old priest, Father Pruitt, has made the trip to the Holy Land, despite his age-related problems. Warren serves as an altar boy and is aware of the pastor's forgetfulness. Riley disappoints his parents. He has no intention of going to church, which incurs the wrath of his father, a devout Catholic. Meanwhile, Bev notices a light in the windows of Pruitt's house and, upon entering, stares in surprise at the man who meets her. And in the shoreline thickets, attacks on the cats begin to occur. Before going to bed, the father tells Riley that after what happened to him, Annie goes to church every day and prays for him. He asks the boy to at least sit in the pew, for it is very important to his mother. At this time, the new sheriff and his son perform namaz before going to bed. The doctor catches the mother trying to climb to the 2nd floor, and Riley sees Warren climb out the window to go to his friends. At night, Riley as usual sees recurrent dreams of the dead girl and of himself sitting in the boat. The dawn is breaking, the altar workers are preparing for the upcoming church service and notice that the wine bowls are already full. The congregation takes their seats, Bev opens the service, people sing hymns while the new priest enters the room. Paul Hill has been sent to replace Father Pruitt, who has left and is hospitalized on the mainland. Paul conducts the service and administers communion to the faithful except for Riley, who has refused to do so. The new priest calls all the parishioners by name, explaining this by Pruitt's stories. Riley decides to accompany Aaron, and the young people reminisce about their past encounters and talk about their experiences. They both vowed not to go back, but nevertheless they are on the island again. Riley lost everything after the accident and Erin is separated from her husband. The man admits that he read all about different religions while he was in prison because he hoped to find God but ended up being an atheist. And here he is of no use to anyone and doesn't know how to move on. In the evening the storm comes to the island and Riley sees what looks like Father Pruitt walking along the beach, but when he goes out to look he finds no one. And in the morning people find hundreds of dead cats on the beach. The citizens cannot determine the cause of death of these animals, although the sheriff suggests some kind of disease, until he discovers that there is not a drop of blood in their bodies. Riley admits to seeing Monsignor Pruitt at night, but nobody believes him. Later, the man travels to the mainland while Father Paul holds a service, but the church is almost empty. Of the regular parishioners, there's only Lisa, the mayor's paralyzed daughter. The priest gives her communion, then walks her home and learns that the girl's mutilation is the result of an accidental shooting by drunk Joe. In the meantime, Erin catches Bev in the storeroom, from where the woman takes a box of poison intending to poison the rats, which have become too numerous. And Father Paul comes to Dr. Sarah's house to administer communion to her sick mother. The elderly woman calls him by the name of Pruitt, which her daughter believes is a symptom of the developing dementia. Back on the island, Riley speaks to Erin. It becomes clear that the two were romantically involved in their early youth. And Annie suddenly notices that her eyesight has improved considerably. In the morning, Father Paul meets his flock at Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Easter Lent. He gives an inspiring speech about the rebirth of the island and the first disciples of Christ, the fishermen, and he reminds them, man must remember that he is dust, and to dust he shall return. After the blessing, the residents gather for the feast. Riley speaks to the priest and again recalls Father Pruitt. He is convinced his eyes did not betray him that night. It was Father Pruitt. Father Paul suggests starting an Alcoholics Anonymous group on the island so that Riley doesn't have to travel so far, especially since there are others here suffering from this evil. The fun is interrupted by an unpleasant incident. Joe's dog dies after eating food off the ground. A new morning arrives. Riley goes out fishing with his father because the father has a bad back. Meanwhile, the sheriff goes to the school pantry where Bev confesses that she left poison in some parts of the island and the dog really could have died from it. But it was unintentional and anyone could have taken the poison. In the evening, Riley visits Father Paul and reveals that Bev has extorted donations for the church from the parishioners after convincing them to accept an agreement with the oil company that poisoned the waters of the bay and to receive generous compensation. And it's the same story everywhere else in the world. Villages are getting poorer and churches are getting more luxurious. The father reminds Riley that he was once a believer, and the boy expresses his contempt for the doctrine of good deity because the idea that suffering leads to purification is appalling. At night, Erin sees a mysterious creature near her house and noticing the bloody discharge rushes to the doctor. But Sarah reassures the woman there is nothing wrong with her baby. Later, she has to convince the frightened mother that she just imagined a face in the window. Meanwhile, the dealer passing by an empty house hears strange noises inside. He walks through the door and is attacked. It is morning and Father Paul for some reason takes a particularly close look at Lisa. Then he insists that the girl get up from her chair and come up for communion, and to everyone's shock, Lisa gets up and walks up to the priest. At night, Father Paul enters the confessional and tells himself that he is lying to the parishioners. After all, Father Pruitt was sicker than they thought, and having gone to the Holy Land, the man often fell behind the group, but the parishioners don't need to know that. They will believe that their shepherd is being healed on the mainland and will soon return to the island to witness the miracles that are happening. For after Lisa's recovery, which is perceived by the residents as a miracle, a religious revival begins on Crockett Island. except that Father Paul himself becomes sick and vomits blood after the accomplishment, which Bev sees, and then the woman notices a newspaper clipping with Father Pruitt's portrait hanging on the wall of the priest's house. The doctor examines Lisa and cannot understand the miracle that has occurred, but her parents strongly oppose her examination on the mainland. And later, the woman finds her mother on the second floor of the house, to which she climbed on her own, although she has not been able to walk for a long time. Meanwhile, suffering people begin to converge on the church, which pleases Bev immensely but displeases Father Paul. He doesn't need the publicity, especially since many, including Riley, think it's a misdiagnosis by doctors. But that same evening, a miracle happens to his father. The man suddenly stops having back pain and even asks his wife to dance. At this time, Lisa summons Warren and the couple runs off to have fun, and Riley goes to Aaron. More and more parishioners come to the morning mass, and one day Warren catches Father Paul pouring some kind of liquid into the wine, and during the sermon the priest suddenly collapses without feeling. The story shifts to the time of Father Paul's confession, in which he tells the true story of Monsignor Pruitt. After a visit to Jerusalem near Damascus, he was caught in a sandstorm and took refuge in ancient ruins. This is where Father Paul comes to his senses. He is examined by Sarah, though the man is against any intervention. Meanwhile, the sheriff finds a Bible in his son Ali's possession. And Lisa visits Joe and confesses that she hated him for years for stealing her future, but eventually forgives him. That same day at the school assembly, the sheriff tries unsuccessfully to convince Bev to stop handing out the Bibles to public school students. Later, Erin confesses that she's intimidated by Bev's confidence in her rightness, and Riley shares with her Father Paul's assignment to write penitential letters to loved ones. That same evening, Sarah's mother begins to speak quite sensibly, much to the doctor's surprise. And touched by Lisa's forgiveness, Joe decides to attend the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting with Riley and Father Paul because he intends to change his life. The men go home and Joe confesses that he recently buried his sister on the mainland. That same evening, Ali asks for his father's permission to attend the mass. The kid is interested in everything that happens in the church, but the sheriff is against it. They are Muslims. Ali reminds him it's his father's decision, not his. But the father recalls how his dying wife praised Allah until the very last moment. God cannot decide who gets a miracle and who does not. The sheriff turns off the light and jumps away from the window because behind it is a pale face, but the next moment there is nothing. In the meantime, Father Paul collapses in front of Bev and the congregation and dies coughing up blood. The action carries over to the moment when Pruitt takes refuge in the dark cave. He burns matches, trying to make out the room where he is trapped, and suddenly sees two burning eyes. Then he is attacked by a nightmarish creature that sucks his blood and drinks his own blood in return. The priest concludes that it is an angel because when he wakes up in the morning, Pruitt finds that he is young again. So he decided to take his savior with him. He rode ahead, waiting for the angel to catch up with him. And he was very much afraid that the angel would disappear. Here on the island he hid it from everyone and lied to the parishioners because he was Father Pruitt. The next moment the priest comes back to life. During a scheduled checkup, the doctor informs Erin that her uterus is empty. It was probably a miscarriage. The woman is shocked. How could she not have noticed it at such a late stage? Meanwhile, Bev cancels the mass and her assistant notices the incredible resemblance between Father Paul and Monsignor Pruitt. She is convinced of the miracle and the others are simply frightened. Bev enters the priest's room and discovers that he cannot stand the light. It is also as if he can feel God inside him. Bev persuades him to manifest the miracle to his new apostles. Riley notices an improvement in his father's well-being, and the father confesses his unjust anger towards his son and asks for forgiveness for his omissions. Meanwhile, Sarah is collecting Erin's tests when her mother enters the office. She answers her daughter's questions confidently and looks much better than before. And then Sarah sees the blood in the test tube begin to boil in the sun and burn to the ground. In the meantime, distraught, Erin spends the day with Riley, mourning her unborn child and discussing their childhood. She resents her mother, who was a real dictator and never loved her daughter. And then she managed to marry her mother's mental double, which only her pregnancy saved her from. She just packed up and left. Then Riley recounts his dream. At this time, Father Paul is reciting prayers, which makes him sick, and then he notices the mark of the cross on his hand. He cuts his hand and drinks his blood. Joe tries to talk himself out of buying alcohol and he succeeds with great difficulty. At night, Father Paul holds an evening communion at the house of the doctor's elderly mother, Mildred, who recognizes him as Monsignor Pruitt. Meanwhile, Riley and Erin talk about their ideas of the afterlife and the basics of religion, after which they feel better. That same evening, Joe stops by Father Paul's house and witnesses Father Paul drinking communion wine. Joe looks at the portrait of Pruitt on the wall. Father Paul looks very much like him. The priest embraces Joe, who pulls away, falls, and smashes his head. Seeing the blood, the priest loses his mind and takes to drinking it. In the morning, Riley explains that his dream has changed, Erin has appeared in it, and the woman is sent to the mainland to another doctor. Meanwhile, Bev discovers Joe's dead body and exhausted Father Paul. She asks the mayor's wife to sing hymns, and she herself orders a couple of parishioners to dispose of the corpse. Bev believes that the priest's actions are justified and that his resurrection is a foreshadowing of Christ's second coming. At this time, Erin hears an expert opinion of the doctor who doubts that the pregnancy was real. By evening, Father Paul feels good again. He holds an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting explaining Joe's absence by his trip to see his sister, but Riley knows that this is not true and leaves the meeting confused. When he arrives home, he tells his mother about the priest's lies. At night, Father Paul is visited by Angel, who begins to fill the goblet with his blood, while Riley, determined to deal with it, returns to the recreation center. He opens the doors and is attacked by Angel. In the morning, Sarah's mother impresses her daughter with her blooming appearance, and the sheriff is approached by the mother of the missing dealer, who asks him to track down her son. Meanwhile, the parishioners are informed that the Mass has been postponed until midnight due to Father Paul's illness, and the startled people view Mildred, who is considerably younger. Erin, concerned about Riley's sudden disappearance, files a missing persons report with the sheriff, but the latter suggests that Riley may have gone on a bench or committed suicide. At Good Friday Mass, Father Paul delivers a sermon replete with militaristic rhetoric, urging the congregation to prepare for war as soldiers in the Lord's army. This sermon upsets Mildred, who forbids her daughter to attend the church any further. At night, Erin is visited by Riley, who asks her to go in a boat with him. The woman agrees, even though she suspects something is amiss. After sailing far from the island, Riley recounts what has happened to him. After Angel's attack, he quickly recovered under Father Paul's care. When Riley tried to go outside, he was burnt and was forced to return and listen to the revelations of Father Paul. The priest is convinced that the angel's blood is a gift from God, and he mixes it into his communion wine to cure the people of Crockett Island of all illnesses. The priest also admitted that he had killed Joe, but according to him, the murder was justified. He also believes that the vampirism traits they both display are the grace of God, which Bev fully agrees with. Father Paul demonstrated to the boy his desire for blood as food, but reassured him that this would soon pass. Nevertheless, Riley is not ready to acknowledge what has happened as divine providence, while the priest reminds him of the fear of all who have seen miracles. Meanwhile, Bev brings Riley the goblet of the congregation's blood and he drinks it. The priest releases Riley without listening to Bev's objections, for the man's rebirth is complete. Outside, Riley notices how his perception has changed. The colors are brighter and the air more saturated, and he witnesses a conversation between Mildred and his daughter. He visits his sleeping family before heading over to Erin's. Then they head out to sea, where he has nowhere to go. Riley confesses his love for Erin and asks the woman to flee the island. She reciprocates, but at this moment the dawn breaks. Riley sees in the boat the girl he killed in the accident. She smiles and takes his hand. Riley ignites and burns, turning to ash, and Erin screams in terror. The relatives find Riley's letters, while Erin returns to the island and tells Sarah about what is happening in the city. The doctor shows how her blood samples are vaporized by the sunlight and shows rejuvenated Mildred. At this time, Paul confesses to Bev that he senses Riley's death, but the woman reassures him that the boy, having received a great gift, has chosen his own path. She reminds him of Judah, who is also part of God's plan. Sarah shares with Erin and Mildred her theory that Father Paul is spreading a miracle-creating virus through communion wine. This would also explain the missing pregnancy. After all, it is a foreign element in the body which the virus has decided to deal with dramatically. At this time, Ben brings his son's letters to Father Paul. He senses that something bad has happened. One of the letters is addressed to his father, and Ben asks him to give it to the Monsignor. After Ben leaves, Paul opens the letter and receives a quote, a reminder that they are all ashes, and to dust they shall return. And Erin tries to tell Annie about Riley's death, but the angry woman throws her out, not wanting to believe the terrible news. Sarah informs the sheriff of her suspicions about what is happening in the church, but he refuses to take any action, not wanting to further aggravate relations with the locals, especially since he has already encountered unfair and prejudicial treatment. Erin, Sarah, and Mildred decide to move to the mainland, but find that the mayor has sent the ferries away for repairs, and the fishing boats are almost all in need of repairs. During the night, the power and mobile network go out, which are also shut down by Bev's handmaidens. Erin decides to go to the mass to see the danger for herself. Meanwhile, the sheriff allows his son to attend the midnight mass, and he asks his father to go with him. Before the mass begins, the townspeople make a procession around the island with candles and hymn singing. The service begins with Father Paul confessing to our lie. Then he confesses that he is Monsignor Pruitt. And today is the beginning of a new era for all of them because holy blood flows in their veins. He calls a parishioner and asks him to drink poison, to die and be reborn. The man drinks it and drops dead. When some people see this, they rush to the exit, but the angel in shining garb stands in the doorway. The creature reaches the dais and spreads his wings to the astonished gaps of the people, and then the dead man comes to life and gets to his feet. Bev and her assistants bring out cups of poison and hand them out to everyone present. The sheriff tries to take Ali away, but the boy pulls out his hand. He wants to stay with God. That is when the policeman pulls out his gun, but the congregation rushes at him and throws him to the floor. The boy, in spite of his father's screams, drinks the poison. Lisa's parents do the same, but the girl refuses. Unimaginable things are happening all around. Some are drinking the poison, the others are pushing the cups away. Then Mildred raises the sheriff's gun and shoots Father Paul in the head. A vampire attacks her and carries her away in his claws from the church. Bev orders the doors to be locked. Meanwhile, Ali comes back to life. The dead parishioners are resurrected as vampires and hungry attack those who have not drunk the poison. All hell breaks loose with screams and blood everywhere. Ed turns into a vampire and Sheriff Erin, Lisa, Sarah, Warren, and Annie flee. But Bev gets in their way. Erin shoots her, after which the group escapes. Father Paul regains consciousness while resurrected Bev and her assistants send vampires to attack the townspeople who are not present at the church. After the parishioners turned vampires have left the church, Father Paul is resurrected and, disappointed by the outcome of the mass, removes his robes and remains sitting alone on the steps of the altar of the bloody church, looking at Mildred, who has also turned. Screams can be heard in the town. The vampires are killing their loved ones and converting them. Meanwhile, the group of the runaways hide out in Erin's house, pondering over a future plan of action. Warren recalls his canoe, which is hidden on the outskirts of the island, and Erin realizes that the vampires needed the boats for something. She becomes terrified at the thought that some of the monsters might make it to the mainland. Suddenly, a burning bottle flies in through the window, setting the house on fire. It is Bev. She wants to settle the score with Erin, who shot her. To allow the group to escape, Annie distracts the attackers by exposing Bev's motives. She is just jealous that God loves everyone without singling her out. Bev, who is always so right and so good, must be furious. Then Annie commits suicide by seducing the vampires with her blood. Meanwhile, John Pruitt recalls his affair with Mildred, which resulted in the birth of Sarah, who was forced to live with her fake father, as such circumstances were unacceptable for the pastor. The priest admits that the main reason for bringing Angel to the island was his desire to cure Mildred and live in peace with her and his daughter as a full family. The survivors decide to split up. The adults go to burn the boats prepared by the vampires to leave for the mainland to spread vampirism, while Lisa and Warren flee toward the peat bogs, where the younger Flynn's canoe is stored. Along the way, they encounter other vampires more than once, attacking innocent people who have not attended the midnight mass. Drunk on blood, Bev proposes not to extinguish the house, but instead to burn every building on the island, following the biblical story of the end of the world and the Ark, which will be the building of the rehabilitation center. She and her assistant go to burn the city, unaware that some converts who have not lost their reason and morals refuse to kill. Among them are Riley's parents, who find each other in the middle of the night. The sheriff, Erin, and Sarah meanwhile set fire to the boats. and Lisa and Warren hide in an abandoned house, unaware that they have entered the lair of the beast. The girl lights a match and sees the angel drinking blood of the man dragged into the house. Lisa shoots the monster, but he's so engrossed in what he's doing that he doesn't even notice them. Then Lisa douses the room with fuel, and walking out the door they set fire to the house, but the angel breaks free and flies off into the night. At this time Bev has already prepared a center for the converse to wait out the dawn and calls them out with the sound of a bell. She quotes statements about the ark, but Pruitt abandons her idea and is unwilling to be the leader of the converts. Bev reports that the boats are burned, while Lisa and Warren mentally say goodbye to their families and get into their canoe. Bev takes command and throws the atheist convert out of the ark, mocking his desire to save himself with the believers. Monsignor, on the other hand, invites the man to stay in the church, for God loves everyone regardless of their views because everyone is worthy of salvation. But once inside the church, John sees Sarah, who is going to burn everything with kerosene and a lighter. He confesses that he's her father and regrets that he didn't get to know her better. But at that moment, one of Bev's underlings shoots Sarah. Enraged, Pruitt attacks him, wanting to kill him, but stops himself in time, remembering who he is and where he is. John tries to save Sarah and lets her drink his blood to turn her into a vampire, but she spits it back out, wanting to die human. John and Mildred mourn their daughter's death. They take her body, burn the church, and leave for the bridge by the river, a memorable place where Sarah often played as a child. Meanwhile, the walls of the rehab center are doused with kerosene by the surviving sheriff. Bev mocks the sheriff's religion and shoots him, and Erin emerges from the building, spilling kerosene inside, but is picked up by a flying vampire, taking her aside and gnawing at her neck. But then Ali picks up the lighter and throws it into the building. Bev takes another shot at the sheriff, but his son rushes to the man and takes him away. Realizing that there are no more places to wait out the dawn, the converts disperse, wanting to spend their last moments with their loved ones. Slowly dying, Erin shreds the wings of the blood-sucking vampire with a knife, after which the vampire struggles to rise into the air. He is spotted by Lisa and Warren, who are watching the shore from the boat, and they note the monster's slow speed and that he's unlikely to make it to the mainland before dawn. Erin dies looking up at the stars and remembering Riley. Bev leaves to meet the dawn on the beach. The wounded sheriff and his son also go to the shore, where together they begin to pray, adhering to their native religion. Monsignor Pruitt and Mildred sit on the bridge holding Sarah's body. The father renounces the church and begs his beloved for forgiveness. Finally, dawn breaks. Ali burns in the sunlight, sitting by his father's dead body. Desperate, Bev tries to dig a shelter in the sand and burns up in hysterics. Riley's parents, in a crowd of similarly converted people, greet the dawn by singing hymns praising the Lord. All the islanders burn while Pruitt and Mildred kiss against the rising sun. The only survivors, Lisa and Warren, watch the fire. Suddenly, the girl confesses that she can no longer feel her legs. And that's the end of the series. Write in the comments what you think of this series. Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a romantic horror film called Inhuman Kiss. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Somewhere far from the cities inside the forest, 4 children are venturing towards an abandoned house as the night approaches closer. They begin to play the game of hide and seek, and the girl named Sai tells her friend Noi to go with her inside the house in order to avoid being found by the seeker. They decide to split up into different rooms, and the girl finds a mysterious box on the floor with the lid open. She approaches the container slowly and looks inside, but sees nothing but spider webs and dust. The girl lowers her guard and thinks that she's safe, but fails to notice a bodiless head approaching her from behind and grabbing her with the tentacles. Many years later, Sai has grown up to be a beautiful woman, and she puts lipstick on her mouth before she goes out for the day. The girl meets her friend Jerd, who's all grown up as well, and purposely shows his chiseled body before putting the shirt back on. He clearly has a crush on Sai as he tries everything for the girl's attention, praying that he won't be put in the friend zone. The man accompanies the girl to the local hospital, where she works as a nurse, but they find all her colleagues, including the doctor, missing because of the ongoing war. The two are interrupted by a visiting family that brought their son to be cared for after the boy sustained a minor injury on the knee. The mother tells them that the neighbors saw a demon with a flying head, known as a prasu, eating their livestock at night. She tells them to take precautions by locking the windows and doors before they sleep, but Sai has trouble focusing on their conversations as the girl seems to be distracted by the boy's wounds. At night, before going to sleep, the girl takes the advice from the woman in the hospital and locks the windows in order to protect herself from the Krasu. She closes her eyes and begins dreaming, but sees mysterious visions of the abandoned house and the box inside. The girl wakes up suddenly, not feeling rested after the vivid dream, and sees that her room is a mess while the window has somehow been opened. She begins feeling a strange ping on her chest, revealing a red scar underneath her clothing. What's even more terrifying is that her sheets are soaked with blood that's probably not her own. Sai becomes extremely concerned about what's happening to her and tells Jer to accompany her inside the forest, where she saw the vision of the abandoned house inside her dreams. They follow the road into the trees, but the night is approaching quickly and the young man worries for their safety as they venture further. Suddenly, they hear a footstep from afar and hides immediately, but it turns out to be their childhood friend Noi, who moved away from their village a long time ago. They rush forward to greet their friend, but Jer sees that his crush embraces the other man right away, making him feel extremely conflicted as he senses a love triangle being formed. Their reunion is interrupted when a group of men arrives closely behind with guns, and their leader doesn't look like the humanitarian type. The group arrives into the village and shows their cages full of heads, claiming to be Krasu hunters from the neighboring town. Their leader, Tad, explains that Krasus are very dangerous as they appear at night and devours the livestock of the village, eventually eating the people as well. On top of that, the creatures can multiply extremely quickly as their saliva can infect other women, turning them into Krasus just like the monster. The villagers have a hard time believing this, especially the village leader, who's also Sai's father. But the hunters only request the old man to allow them to stay until they vanquish this evil for the people. Seeing that the men in front of them are heavily armed, the village leader accepts this for the safety of the villagers. The next morning, Sai wakes up in shock after more visions and throws up blood from her mouth onto the floor. She sees that the window is open again just like the night before, and there's even more blood this time on her bed. Sai looks into her shirt and sees that the red scars have grown exponentially, signifying that she's in fact a Krasu. What's even worse, she finds out that Jer has decided to join the hunting party along with many other villagers. Noi tries to convince his friend to quit the group as the hunters are dangerous and violent, but Jer refuses, claiming that this is the only way to protect Sai along with the people that he cares about. At night, the hunters begin patrolling everywhere around the village looking for the demon, and Sai begins to feel the sensation of transformation once again. Her veins turn red as all the blood gathers around her neck, and eventually, the girl's head detaches from her body, turning her into a terrifying monster. A sleeping neighbor wakes up in the middle of the night and sees that her baby is missing from the carriage, causing her to cry in agony. The husband quickly runs to the demon hunters for help, and the people run back to the village where they see a glowing demon flying across the sky. Tad begins shooting at the flying head, trying to kill the Krasu while completely disregarding the baby's life. After firing multiple shots, the demon appears to have vanished from the area, and luckily, they're able to find the woman's infant on the floor. At the same time, Noi sees the Krasu flying in the sky and begins chasing after the monster, eventually arriving at Sai's house. Worried about the girl's safety, Noi climbs onto the building towards the window, only to see that the head actually belongs to Sai as the girl reattaches herself. Sai regains consciousness, but realizes that her transformation was witnessed by the man she loves, which causes Noi to fall down from the ladder. The girl cries in agony as she worries that her love might never accept her after learning her demonic secrets. Meanwhile, Noi has gone to seek refuge and wisdom from the monk in the village, who appears to know a great deal about the origins of the demons. Apparently, these creatures come in both genders, and the male demons are known as Kwahans. The first monsters used to be normal people, but they experimented with black magic which caused them to turn into hideous creatures of the night. The monk knows that this Krasu must be someone very important to the young man, and tells him to make the right decisions following his heart. Shortly afterwards, Sai begins to transform again as she struggles on the floor. But Noi decides to help his friend after listening to the monk, and brings her numerous chickens so that the girl can satisfy her hunger without being killed. Sai goes to find Noi the next day and embraces the man in tears, thanking him for helping her through this peril and also accepting her despite knowing what she is. Their relationship becomes closer as they both begin falling in love. The man continues to feed the girl at night, which protects her from the hunters, and no one has seen the Krasu for over a month. Noi also received important information from the monk, who tells him that there's a plant which is capable of temporarily preventing a Krasu's transformation, although he's never seen it himself. One day, while looking after a girl in a hospital, Sai drinks a cup of tea and puts it on the table. Her work is interrupted when Jer calls her and warns the woman to be very careful, as there'll be a full-scale hunt for the Krasu tonight. What they don't realize is that Sai's patient is looking towards the cup of tea on the table as she plans to drink it. The infection occurs very quickly as the girl begins transforming on the same day in front of her parents. The hunters show up immediately and sees the headless body on the floor while the demon hides under the table. After trying to remove the Krasu by hand and failing, Tat orders his men to shoot the creature without mercy, and they fire numerous rounds at the table, killing the girl as a result. The family screams in agony, seeing their only daughter die in front of them, while the hunter rips out the creature's heart and laughs maniacally. Because Sai was the only nurse working in the hospital that day, the demon hunter also begins suspecting her as the original Krasu, causing great distress amongst her friends. On top of that, Sai feels extremely guilty about the girl's death and realizes that she might be killed very soon as well. Noi tries to comfort her and tells Sai that they might still be able to fix the situation, as he found plants close to the abandoned house which might temporarily stop her transformation. They quickly go to the location inside the forest and seize the haunting structure, bringing back unpleasant memories of the past. The two decide to venture further into the backyard, where they see numerous glowing plants on the ground. Sai hesitates, but eventually takes one of the fruits and puts it in her mouth, which immediately alleviates her conditions. Noi quickly gathers as many plants as he can, while Sai looks at him and smiles. The girl realizes how much the man cares for her, and the two share a passionate kiss after finally finding a solution to her desperate situation. However, the celebration is cut short by the demon hunters who followed them along with their friend Jert. After seeing his crush kissing someone else, the man charges towards Noi and begins punching him furiously, while Sai runs away from her pursuers towards the abandoned house. She rushes into the room and sees the large box once again, but this time it's glowing red and seems to be drawing her closer. Sai begins remembering what happened that night many years ago, when the Krasu approached her from behind and kissed her in the mouth, transferring the woman's memories into the girl. Sai becomes possessed by the previous Krasu and begins killing her pursuers one after the other. Tat sees this and begins firing at the demon, but Jer tries to stop him, giving Sai a chance to escape. The hunter becomes furious and throws the young man off the building. After some time, Sai was able to return to her body, and Noi takes this opportunity to sneak back into the village alongside the girl. Sai immediately goes back home and puts the medicine into a safe place, while the village leader is notified of a terrible event that happened last night. It turns out that all the demon hunters were killed by the Krasu, and the only one that survived the attack was their leader, who also brought Jer back to the village. The hunter tells the villagers about the horrific encounter with the demon, and the man accuses the village leader's daughter of committing the mass murder. He manages to convince the people to go after Sai in a witch hunt, as the father tries desperately to stop everyone. Luckily, Sai's able to remain human by eating the herbs and appears in front of the people as a normal girl. She takes this opportunity to frame the hunter, saying that the man tried to assault her inside the forest. But Tat refuses her accusations and tells Jer to confess the truth about what really happened. After struggling about what to say, the young man decides to lie for the woman he loves by confirming with her story. The hunter immediately takes the village leader hostage, threatening the people to stay away. He then fires the gun, giving himself a chance to escape. After seeing the man run away, the village leader tells everyone to go home, while Sai looks at her friend with guilt, feeling ashamed for the lies that she told. Jer goes back home, feeling emotionally and physically drained, but suddenly sees a person behind him who turns out to be the hunter. The man walks closer and proceeds to bite him with horrifying fangs. Meanwhile, Sai is able to stop her transformation by eating the medicine, but the supply runs lower with every passing day. Noi tries to solve this issue by growing the herbs, but the man's efforts prove to be useless as the plants all die before producing any fruits. He tries to look for the medicine in the location behind the abandoned house, but finds it all burnt to dust by the demon hunter who's determined to kill the Krasu. With no other choice, Noi tells his girlfriend that they have to leave this village and plans to escape with her tomorrow after sunset. Realizing that she has to leave everyone behind, the girl goes to see her friend Jert one last time. She enters his room, only to see the man covering himself using a blanket and trembling in fear. The girl tries to comfort her friend, but Jert tells her that he knew she was a Krasu from the very beginning, as he saw her eating the livestock on the first day. The only reason that he joined the hunters was to give them false information and protect Sai ahead of the huntings. He expresses great pain every time he sees the girl with Noi, but continues to protect her from behind the scenes. Jer reveals that he's also undergoing a horrific transformation after being bit by the demon hunter, who's clearly a Kohan, the male equivalent of a Kwasu. He begs Sai to not leave him, now that he's a terrifying monster who nobody wants to be with. The next day, Noi pays a visit to the monk a final time and tries to inquire more information about the Kwasu's legend. The holy man tells Noi that the first Kwasu was the wife of the first Kwahan, but the woman cheated on the husband, which resulted in her death, as the Kwahan ripped her heart out from her chest. Ever since the first incarnation, the Kwahan is destined to try and kill every Kwasu on this planet. Before sunset, Sai prepares to leave her home permanently, but her father stops her and brings her to the public theater in order to show everyone that his daughter is not a demon. Noi arrives at their meeting location but sees that the girl is nowhere in sight and realizes that something is very wrong. Without any more medicines, Sai begins transforming in the public as her head detaches from her body, causing everyone to scream in terror. Meanwhile, Jerd becomes extremely hopeless as he realizes that Sai would never keep her promise. The man screams furiously and begins to transform, eventually turning into a vampire creature just like the hunter. Jer flies towards the public theater with Tad, where the people are hunting the Kwasu, and grabs the woman's head from the air. He looks at Sai with anger and tries to kill her, but Noi arrives just in time to stop his friend. After looking at the girl and regaining his humanity, Jer charges towards the man who's truly responsible for this madness, and the two begins to fight furiously in the air. Jer manages to knock the hunter downwards as they both fall towards the ground. The two continues to exchange blows, but Tad is able to gain the advantage very quickly and pins the young man to the floor. The hunter strikes the man in the chest and pulls his heart out, killing Jerd as a result. The monster then turns the attention to the Kwasu as Noi carries the woman's body and tries to escape. Sai attacks the demon to protect her boyfriend and brings the creature into the skies. But suddenly, a gunshot is fired at the vampire's heart and kills the monster in mid-air. It turns out that the monk has followed them in order to help the lovers, and he reveals that he was actually the husband of the previous Kwasu who was responsible for Sai's infection. He tries to amend his actions that cause so much pain and tells Noi to run with the girl towards the water where a boat is waiting for them. The man grabs the girl's body and runs towards the river while the villagers chase behind them to finish off the monster. Noi arrives at the boat and puts the body inside but notices that Sai is not coming along. The girl sees that her body is full of damage after being attacked by the villagers and sees no hope of surviving anymore. She kisses the man for the last time and they both cry knowing that they're destined to be separated forever. Sai cuts the ropes to the boat and sends her boyfriend away from this area as they look at each other in tears. Suddenly, a gunshot fired by the villager hits the girl through the head and kills her in the process. Noi runs towards his girlfriend and cries in agony as he sees the only person who matters to him in this world being taken away forever. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. A young man returns home and discovers on the carpet in the living room his own body. Next to it lies an envelope with the inscription, "Look at me." The initial shock is replaced by curiosity as Alex finds a flash drive in the envelope, which he immediately plugs into his computer and on the screen sees just himself. The second Alex reassures himself he is not high and has not gone insane and advises to listen carefully. Thus, it all started with men in black coming to his house. Rebecca, an employee of a private scientific research institute of advanced technologies which cooperates with the National Security Agency of the USA, has a very tempting offer for Alex. But first, Alex must sign non-disclosure agreement, for which Rebecca offers a check for a substantial amount. Having signed the papers, Alex learns the story of an American unregistered satellite which the USA did not launch. Strangely enough to admit, the satellite is allegedly from the future and contains a coded message inside. If Alex agrees, he will be put to sleep and delivered to the laboratory. The institute knows that he is practically bankrupt and lives in a house inherited from his parents. To prove the seriousness of her intentions, Rebecca immediately transfers a large sum to Alex's account, which convinces him to sign the documents. The next day, he is put in a car, given an injection, after which he falls asleep and only comes to his senses in a closed, secret place. Rebecca shows him the laboratory where the satellite is already located. And the guy starts solving the task. 5 weeks pass, but there are no results yet. Rebecca suggests Alex take a day off, but the guy does not need it. One day he is visited by a vision in which a young woman decodes the same task. After that, Alex bleeds from his nose. Later he finds the name of this woman written on the frame of the bed. Soon, Alex manages to decrypt part of the code, which contains drawings of an unknown device. Rebecca announces the end of his work and informs him that he will be taken home. Alex comes to his senses at home late at night. He feels ill, which he attributes to fatigue and stress. But after a few days, the malaise intensified, and he began to be haunted by persistent hallucinations. And one day, two strange-looking men appear on the threshold of his house, wanting to know why he agreed to decrypt the code. Alex does not understand because decryption is just his job, which pays well. The men continue to press Alex with questions about morality. Don't the consequences of his work bother him, since the device to be created from the decrypted drawings will be the most powerful weapon in the world? Alex's head starts to hurt, and he asks the men to leave. They thank him for the answers and leave. Alex immediately feels better and sits down at the computer, but at that moment, a call comes from Rebecca, reminding him of the signed non-disclosure agreements. An indignant Alex realizes that the Institute is watching him, and when he again sits down at the computer in his house, the lights go out. Alex goes outside and suddenly sees one of the two men who came to him with questions on the opposite side of the street, but the man's body starts growing before his eyes. Frightened, Alex runs home and looks out the window to see the giant's hand reaching for his window. Alex extends his hand to meet it, and morning comes. Rebecca, who has arrived, finds Alex at work. He tries to explain that humanity lives in two-dimensional space, and his recent guests are a highly developed civilization that exists not only in space but also in time. They can be in this room but earlier or later, and they can watch what is happening through some kind of window in time. Alex tries to convey to Rebecca the danger of the device they are building, which can start World War III. Then the woman informs him that she knows about his illness, a brain tumor. The guy blames the Institute, which placed him in a room with a radioactive satellite, causing a tumor to develop in his brain, and insists on stopping the construction of the device. Alex, in the present, pulls his dead body out of the house and buries it in the forest, then returns to the computer and continues to listen to the story from his future self. Alex, in the future, regrets that they did not want to listen to him because he understood that something ominous was coming. Then he remembers the woman. She is cryptographer. Alex finds her address, but Beth refuses to talk to him. Alex shouts that he is dying. He has 6 months left. After that, Beth opens the doors and informs that she has 2 years left. She also realized that it was a weapon, and the drawing supposedly came from the future. There is another person, Schieferman, who communicates with her through the computer and sends her tasks, which she solves when she feels normal. Beth starts feeling unwell, so a man takes her to the bedroom, while he goes downstairs, where it seems like he sees the girl's life in the mirrors. There she is, saying goodbye to her beloved in military uniform. There his comrades inform her of terrible news, and there she is with a handful of pills in her hand, trying to leave this life. But then his attention is captured by a message from Schieferman appearing on the computer monitor. Alex responds, but Schieferman quickly realizes that it's not Beth and disconnects. The man then grabs a pack of printed papers with tasks previously given by Schieferman. In the morning, Beth finds him on her sofa, with the papers glued together. The guy points out to her that all this are pieces of a puzzle which, when assembled, can give an answer. Schieferman clearly doesn't work at the Institute. Alex asks Beth to help stop the creation of a death machine. The girl reports that she fell ill specifically after working with the satellite. She started having hallucinations and began thinking about a message from the future. What if it's possible to contact the sender? She began to hear the voices of the dead and one day heard her own voice. She also saw aliens, though she doesn't believe in them, and asks Alex to leave. Alex goes home, where people in black are waiting for him. Rebecca orders him not to meet with Beth anymore and urges him to use the remaining time wisely. Angered, the guy sends the guests to hell, and upon entering the house discovers that all his papers with conclusions have disappeared. Meanwhile, Beth sees a bright light at her house, which makes her feel sick. The woman screams in fear and tries to hide. Alex tries to drown his thoughts in alcohol when a message from Schieferman arrives on his computer. The guy is sure that Rebecca is hiding behind this nickname, but the interlocutor denies it. At that moment, the doorbell rings. Beth is on the threshold. It turns out that Schieferman directed Beth here and sent her the blueprints of a device capable of destroying the technology from the future. The couple begins developing a virus capable of destroying the machine being created from the blueprints they decrypted through the computer. But the next morning, Rebecca bursts into Alex's house. Representatives of the institute know about their work and are already on their way there. She gives the name of the institute's founder and orders to go to him as soon as possible. She is Schafferman and hope to destroy the device with their help. Then cars approach Alex's house. The couple escapes through the back exit. Rebecca is caught, given an injection, and thrown into a car. Meanwhile, all the gas burners in the kitchen are opened. In the evening, Alex and Beth arrive at scientist Miles, who immediately recognizes both of them, as he has always followed their work. The thing is, this satellite was not the only one. There was another, which orbited Earth for about 400 years. Apparently, unknown beings from the future were waiting for Earthlings to grow up, fly into space, and be able to decrypt their message. The ancient satellite also contained blueprints of a machine whose purpose was to limit the evolution of humanity within the third dimension. But when Miles announced his discovery, he was laughed at. He also developed a tumor, luckily not fatal. He is sure that aliens are capable of existing in several dimensions. They do not perceive time in a linear form as humans do. And the second device, which is now being created at the Institute, will likely provide them access to the human dimension. So far, they are like watching a videotape where humans are movie characters. With the help of the first device, they can watch this movie but cannot change what is happening. But the second will allow changing the existing reality. Miles is just beginning to understand the essence of this process, but cannot explain everything completely. After all, even the appearance of the aliens is formed by the human brain itself. And by the way, he has been in contact with a huge alien visible only to him, living in his garden for more than 30 years. Miles constantly looks at it, causing his brain to adapt and begin to see the true appearance of the humanoid. But his guests see no one. Miles is sure that the tumor in their heads is the aliens' help so that people could perceive their reality. Alex suggests simply smashing the device with a hammer, but where is the guarantee that they will not restore it in the Institute? So all data on the server needs to be erased, although no one even knows the location of the Institute. But Miles reminds that he is one of its founders, and he pulls out a map with a detailed plan of the Institute. At that moment, a loud bang is heard at the door. The couple runs away, while Miles tries to calm down the raging alien. Alex and Beth hit the road and soon find the Institute's building, where they open a hatch through which they sneak inside. There they separate to increase the chances of finding the laboratory. Alex witnesses the strange behavior of a guard who constantly returns backward and realizes that time inside the Institute is looped. Beth also falls into this loop. Realizing the futility of her attempts to go further, the girl activates the bomb. But because of the time loop, she is unable to leave the dangerous place. Alex goes into a dark room and tries to carry the bomb further when he is overtaken by an alien and literally disintegrates the man into small particles. A minute later, Alex finds himself tied to a table. Opposite him sits a humanoid. Alex thinks he has died, but the alien denies his belief. They are simply curious about the human appearance and their experience of time. Linear time for aliens is incomprehensible and tedious, a labor-intensive cycle of empty beliefs. Humans are like in a trap, forced to constantly go through the same thing. Aliens, on the other hand, exist outside of time and space. They are in every moment. Therefore, causal connection and sequence of actions for them is a mystery. What will happen if a human no longer has to wait for something? Alex realizes humans will become similar to the appearance of aliens, but the familiar personality, the ego, dies in the moment. The alien is surprised. Death is natural, but man hides and distances himself from it. Time determines everything for a human. It is both a giver and a thief. A human sees the world as he imagined it, and what will happen when the source of projection disappears. Even with the eternity of self-analysis, man will not understand the difference between reality and illusion. With each newly born, a new reality comes. Therefore, a person always stands before choice. Alex feels very bad, and then the alien offers to return to the moment before the guy got sick, with the information he now has. Alex decides that he would not have gone to work at the Institute and would have stopped all this. The alien is surprised. Why would he change his behavior if he's not able to change the situation? And then Alex admits, people do not choose what will happen. The humanoid insists, will his return to the past make a difference? Can something change? And immediately, the guy finds himself in his home, in front of the computer. He records this flash drive, realizing that nothing can be changed. The world may disappear tomorrow, but this is not news. Everything has already happened. Everything ended before it began. He puts the flash drive in an envelope and falls to the floor. The last words on the flash drive are about Alex in the past, warning Beth, and he drives to the girl's house, while Alex from the future, in his last words, asks to forget about everything and live on. Quite an interesting movie that makes you think, what if the concept of time really does not exist, and we live only here and now in one single moment? Who made us believe that there is a past and a future? And is it true that a person does foolish things, not thinking about how his thoughts and actions change his own future? Friends, write your opinion in the comments. Hey guys, today I will tell you about the second season of the fantasy drama from 2020, Warrior Nuns, based on the series of comics of the same name by artist and writer Ben Dunn.
Is this our thing now?
While swimming in the pool, Ava recalls what has happened to her since she went from being a paralyzed simpleton to a warrior nun wielding a mystical halo. The girl's musings are interrupted by a phone signal reminding her of her duty. Once a member of the Order of the Cruciform Sword, she's now in a hurry for her regular job at the cafe. Arriving for her shift, Ava listens to customers talk about the explosion at the Vatican and rumors that it was Angel Adriel himself who broke out of the basement, proclaiming himself a mission. Miguel intervenes in the company's conversation, mocking the legends about angels and miraculous cure of the infected, calling Adriel an imposter. Left alone with Ava, Miguel tries to get her opinion, but the girl says she doesn't think about the subject at all, fearing that she might expose herself. A colleague asks Ava to go upstairs to her boss's office, and Beatrice also asks a friend to talk less to visitors about legends so as not to draw suspicion to herself. On her way home in the evening, Ava can't get away from the prophet fanatics handing out religious leaflets. One of them annoys the girl so much that she uses her power and pushes him aside. Meanwhile, in the monastery in Spain, having finished watching videos on social media with her friends, Camilla goes down to see Mother Superior. The woman instructs the girl to go to London. According to the order, one of the ministers is possessed by a demonic ghost. The girl agrees without any complaints, but Mother Superior sees that something is bothering her. Camilla confesses that there's no way she can come to terms with Mary's disappearance. Portugal. Drunken Father Vincent always walks looking over his shoulder, and it turns out that that's for a good reason. Out of nowhere, he is attacked by Lilith, and the old man can only save his life by telling her that Mary is alive. The Bishop of the Vatican agrees to an audience with nun Yasmin Monet. The girl says that she's preparing an article about the lost Christian artifacts, but she immediately directs the conversation to rumors about Adriel and the attack on the Vatican. This changes the bishop's mood, but the nun keeps pushing, claiming that she has learned about a certain female order in the course of her investigation. To avoid spilling the beans, the priest ends the meeting, but Yasmin isn't upset. She has managed to hack into the network. Jillian sits by the archway, which has finally begun to come to life, but the field still hasn't stabilized and the girl can't get through the portal. Any attempt to use the portal ends up leaving burn marks on her hands. Christian is thrilled by her colleague's discoveries, but he guesses that she's only driven by a desire to find her son Michael, who has disappeared into another world. Christian asks Jillian to sign the renovation documents for the building he bought for the company, Arctech. After looking at the documents, the woman begins to doubt their contents, but deciding not to offend her friend with mistrust, she signs them. Ava continues her training by running over water, but at one point her strength leaves her and she falls. The girl admits to Beatrice that she's tired of sitting around while Adriel gains strength. However, her older friend reminds her that they have an uphill battle ahead of them. Christian arrives at the Vatican and declares that Jillian has given him full control of Arctech. He wants to merge the company with the church on condition that the bishop accepts the appearance of a new prophet, Adriel. The bishop realizes that the impostor has fooled yet another fanatic. Miguel comes back to the bar and confesses to the girl that he volunteers in the community of Samaritans fighting Adriel and they need the people like Ava. Mother Superior Susanna calls the bishop and asks the Vatican to intervene. Adriel is gaining strength and he has managed to fool hundreds of Catholics already. The priest believes that it is too early to sound the alarm. First, he should make a statement that Adriel is an impostor. And if that doesn't work, call on the Order of the Cruciform Sword for help. This conversation is overheard by Yasmin. She has just received a confirmation of her hunch. Vincent arrives at his residence and escorts Lilith inside, telling the guards that she's his friend. Ava convinces Beatrice to have some fun and have a couple of shots. The girls are having carefree fun. Meanwhile, at the Italian convent on her way to dinner, Mother Superior sees a gruesome picture. The bodies of the nuns in crimson puddles lie in the parish yard. At night, the nuns return home from the bar, and Ava notices Miguel, who is acting strangely. She decides to follow him and witnesses the guy getting beaten up by a crowd of fanatic hooligans. Ava helps her friend, and they are joined by Beatrice, who didn't really like the suspicious guy before. The young people tell her about the Samaritans, and the nun decides to accept Miguel's help in their fight against Adriel. Meanwhile, Mother Superior tries to warn the other monasteries where members of the order are based. However, the light bulbs on the map go out one by one, which means the warrior nuns are either destroyed or they leave their outposts. The company decides to sneak into the headquarters of Adriel followers, the firstborn sons. But seeing that the members of the sect are leaving with some cargo, the friends decide to follow them. Mother Superior orders Camilla to pack their things so they can hide and lay low as soon as possible. But suddenly the nuns notice that the light on the map has not gone out on the Madrid cell, which means there are still living members of the order out there. Father Vincent leads Lilith into the prison, promising that Mary is sitting in one of the cells. But as soon as the witch comes in sight, the priest locks the door behind her. On the other side, dozens of warriors come out at the girl, but Lilith easily dispatches them. The company watches as fanatics stack a prayer circle with a cross in the field and begin to pray. At this point, Ava's attention is attracted by a strange sound, and turning around, the girl sees a cloud of locusts rushing at them. On their way back, the friends try to explain what they have seen. And seeing how the girls are calm about everything, Miguel suspects something is wrong. Ava has to confess that they are the nuns of the order, but he takes it as a joke. Left alone, the girls decide that everything that is happening is a biblical execution reproduced by Adriel. Mother Superior and Camilla fly to Madrid and look for the headquarters of the order, which is housed in a flower store. From the scattered flowers, it is clear that something terrible has happened here as well. Yasmin confesses that she summoned Mother Superior to show her the bodies of the dead sisters. The nuns try to find out how Yasmin knew about them, but she says she can only reveal the truth to the warrior nun. Miguel comes to Ava's work and invites her to interrogate one of the firstborns they took. To sneak away, the girl cuts her arm, but the wound immediately disappears, much to Miguel's surprise. Beatrice asks her friend to stay out of it. The Samaritans have illegally kidnapped a man, and they shouldn't get involved. But Ava stubbornly does her own thing. Yasmin suggested the nuns take up residence in her room, but not wanting to risk it, the women choose their own hiding place and put the stranger to sleep so that she won't see the path they take to get there. Meanwhile, Lilith escapes from the prison and arrives at her mother's house. Miguel brings his new friends to the Samaritan headquarters, and when the boys begin interrogating the prisoner, Ava sees the devil in him. Father Vincent arrives at the main square, and seconds later, locusts appear there. The townspeople become scared. Suddenly, Adriel appears and saves the terrified people, thus earning a new addition to the army of fans. Even the priests from the Vatican begin to believe in Adriel's power. The bishop speaks with his subordinates, demanding that the impostor not be glorified. The mother rebukes Lilith for losing the battle for the halo and for failing to live up to her hopes by losing her place in the Order of the Cruciform Sword. Yasmin comes to her senses and tells the nuns that she grew up in a family that helps the order, and now the girl must find the owner of the halo, Ava, and give her her secret. Looking at Ava, the prisoner recognizes her as the owner of the halo and demands that she return it to its true owner, Adriel. Beatrice knocks the chatty kid out, but he breaks the ropes and frees himself. The demon proves to be very strong, and the warrior nuns cannot defeat him until Ava activates her halo and banishes the entity out of the boy. Beatrice hurries to get her friend out of the way to avoid any more questions. Adriel shows up at the bishop's office and offers to join forces, admitting that the boy is indeed the son of God. But just as the priest refuses and asks the madman to leave, Adriel displays a couple of tricks demonstrating his power. The prophet leaves, but his offer still stands. Lilith comes to Dr. Jillian for help and asks her to examine the scales that have appeared on her shoulder. While sitting in Dr. Jillian's office, the nun sees an emergency call from the Sisters of the Order, but she refuses to go to Madrid. While packing to escape again, Ava and Beatrice quarrel, but they are interrupted by a signal on her older friend's chest. She tells a student that they have been summoned to Madrid. The second message arrives with news from Lilith that the Order has lost Mary. Vincent shows Adriel the signal and instructs the old man to join the women. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ava is excited about her trip to Madrid. Finally, the girls find the flower store where Mother Superior has left a movie ticket for them. The nuns have to scramble to avoid falling into the hands of the hunters. On the street, the girls spot a tail and have to get rid of it, but in an alleyway they are awaited by Vincent, who puts Beatrice to sleep. The priest tries to convince Ava that Adriel is the true prophet and she should go with him to return the prophet's halo. But the girl takes to flight and manages to defeat the old man. The girls make it to the movie theater where they finally meet Camilla. The nun takes her friends to the hiding place, the cellar beneath the cinema, where old Mother Superior is already waiting for them. The old woman gets straight to the point. She tells the sisters about the attack on the Order and says that the time has come to do her duty. Yasmin comes out to the girls, and when Ava is beside her, the girl's pendant glows blue and she recognizes the warrior nun. Now, Yasmin can reveal the secret of how to defeat Adriel. Jillian offers Lilith to cure the problem with a pass through the archway, but the girl realizes that the doctor needs it in order for her to find his son there. Yasmin tells the girls about the crown of thorns that can defeat the imposter. Meanwhile, traitors begin to appear in the Vatican, among those close to the bishop. As Yasmin continues talking about the crown, she reveals a secret. The thorny garment is not only a means of torture, it also disempowers the likes of Adriel. The only problem is that the wreath was stolen years ago and is now stored in a museum, but Ava doesn't see this as an obstacle and the girls go out on a tour. Disabling the cameras and distracting the guards, the nuns head for the exhibit. However, the only way to know that it's the right wreath is for Eva to touch it. Lilith makes up her mind, and wearing a special suit, she enters the archway, but a second later she is thrown back. She's shocked because she felt that she had been on the other side of the portal for almost 2 hours, and she was clearly not welcome there. The bishop goes down to the prison to visit the traitor and learn from him how Adriel creates the punishments of heaven. To make the prisoner more talkative, the priest tries medieval torture methods on him. At first, the impostor's henchman tolerates the pain, assuring him that Adriel is the real Son of God and all miracles are real. However, when the torture becomes unbearable, he admits that the prophet is collaborating with Arctech and the company uses its technology to create illusions. Lilith tries to understand why someone threw her out, and Jillian promises to deal with it next time. But the girl has no intention of entering the archway again, and she makes that clear to the doctor. After the conversation, Lilith disappears, forgetting the cross in the office. At night, the girls return to the museum to retrieve the crown. Mother Superior eliminates the guard, and the group of nuns sneaks in, sending old camera footage to the security monitors and disabling the laser alarms. Using the halo, Ava takes the crown, but nothing happens to it, and her friends ask Yasmin to help. Jillian decodes the tape from Lilith's camera, and as she speeds up, she sees someone's face on it. While the nuns are searching for the real wreath, Camilla notices that there is someone else in the museum beside them. Ava finally finds the artifact, but at that moment Camilla sees Adriel, and Vincent appears in front of the warriors and puts the crown on the girl's head, thereby depriving her of her superpowers and taking her with him. While Vincent is carrying Ava, the girl has terrible visions. She finally regains consciousness. Before leaving the exhausted girl in a dark alleyway, Vincent promises to pray for her before Adriel destroys her. But suddenly, Miguel comes to the girl's aid. By some miracle, he also happens to have superpowers. He says that explanations can wait, and having dealt with the priest, Miguel and Ava run away. Lilith comes to Adriel and, showing him her crusted hands, asks for his help. The nuns load Vincent into a car and drive off in search of Eva, shaking the cops on the way. The young people are finally safe, and Miguel returns Ava's crown and admits that he was sent from the other side of the arch to protect her. As they talk, a crowd of primitives in gas masks passes them, and Ava guesses that a new punishment awaits the city. In the meantime, the nuns get stuck on the road because of a flat tire. Miguel leads Ava to the gates of a cemetery, assuring her that he knows a way to destroy Adriel. All the while, the girl keeps seeing terrible visions, but she tries not to pay attention to them. After stealing a food delivery car, the nuns drive on, and Camilla recalls that the entire company has been hungry for a long time. After rummaging through the shelves, the girl finds something they can refresh themselves with: unusually shaped cakes that go down well with the sisters. Jillian arrives at the building she recently bought, and in the center the doctor sees a ritual cross and sectarians. Christian is also among them. Jillian asks Christian to explain what he has been doing all this time with her company and the building. Instead, Christian begins to talk about the all-powerful Adriel who will soon conquer the whole world. Beatrice arrives at the cemetery looking for her friend, but the gas Adriel sprays as part of the next execution makes her scared. The girl removes a gas mask from one of the firstborns. Miguel and Ava daringly walk into Adriel's sect's church, and the two witness a ritual in which a demon possesses a teenager. Ava wonders how to stop all of this, but Miguel asks her to protect the crown and steps forward to take the hit. The guy's plan works. He lets himself be possessed by the demon, and then by painting in blue, he banishes it to show the sectarians what's really going on in the church. Mother Superior leads Vincent out of the car and into the woods to finish him off, but the woman doesn't have the strength to shoot him, so she simply pushes him into a ravine and inflicts some mutilation. Beatrice arrives at the church just as the commotion begins, some trying to escape and some trying to expel Miguel, thinking that he's the one who brought the devil. The three of them are trapped, and hugging her friends, Ava activates the halo. Adriel tells Lilith that their destinies are intertwined, and they will conquer the world together. Feeling important for the first time, the girl believes the imposter. Miguel, Ava, and Beatrice manage to escape from the church, but now they risk being caught by the police or other fanatics, so the guy offers a safe haven, his house. Adriel tells Lilith about Ariella, the girl he loved and to whom he gave his halo. The prophet dreamed that together they would create a religion based on truth. Mother Superior also tells the nuns this story. When the angel first came to Earth 1,000 years ago, he created an underground upside-down church. But Ariella prayed for a long time to find the truth, and God answered the girl. He sent her a crown that was to stop the imposter. Adriel and Mother Superior simultaneously tell this story, but each does it differently. The nun thinks that Ariella saw evil in the prophet, while Adriel tells Lilith that the crown corrupted the beloved and she betrayed him. Ariella put the crown on the prophet's head, and he was imprisoned in a cave in which he spent 1,000 years. Except that the girl paid for it with her own life. And Mother Superior warns Ava that no one has ever managed to defeat Adriel and survive. The company arrives at Jillian's house, from which Lilith's signal was last heard, but the doctor asks the guests to leave. Miguel then asks to tell the woman that her son is here. Seeing the boy, who is much older than the day they last met, Jillian falls on his neck and cannot hold back her tears. The nuns try to find out from the doctor where Lilith has gone to, but Jillian cannot answer the question. The only thing the doctor can tell is that the girl's physical and mental health has severely deteriorated. Mother Superior goes outside to talk on the phone. The bishop asks the abbess to come to a secret meeting where further struggles with Adriel will be decided. Miguel, who is really Michael, comes into his childhood room and looks at the drawings he drew when Adriel manipulated him. Camilla hears someone's voice again and is caught in a frightened state by Beatrice. Camilla confesses that after being stroked on the back by one of the sisters in the convent, the girl is suffering from severe headaches, and her friend suggests that she have a little examination. Jillian recalls the day Michael ran into the portal. Once on the other side, the boy wandered alone for a long time, and then the shining angels took him to Rhea, the lord of Adriel. It was she who trained the angel and then sent him to Earth to stop the evil. The abbess and Yasmin arrive at the meeting with the priests, where everyone is already gathered. The archbishop begins talking about Adriel, calling him a wolf in sheep's clothing. The charlatan himself, meanwhile, continues to tell Lilith about himself, complaining about his life in the dungeon. Angel offers to show his friend his difficult fate, and to do so he places burning fingers over her eyes. Jillian shows her son the face that ended up on her tape, and from what he sees, the boy faints. Beatrice does a scan of Camilla's spine, and during the procedure the girls are being frank with each other. One of the nuns confesses that she has doubts about Adriel, but if he really turns out to be the prophet, all the scriptures will lose their significance. The picture shows a cross inserted into Camilla's spine, which is what is causing the hallucinations. Unfortunately, Beatrice cannot remove it. Adriel asks Lilith forgiveness for the pain, but he convinces her to open her eyes, and when the burns come off, the girl sees demons and a completely different world, which she calls the truth. Beatrice finds Ava in the courtyard as she's practicing putting a wreath on the monument's head, but the halo goes off again and the girl falls. The nun tries to support a friend and assures her that they will defeat Adriel no matter what it takes. Christian meets Vincent in Arctac and reminds him that in just 2 days they will give the world to their master. A discussion breaks out at the meeting of priests. There are those who doubt Adriel's con game and believe that one cannot punish an angel without understanding his true purpose. At this, Bishop Francesco reveals to his colleagues the secret of Arctac, urging them to understand that all the punishments sent were nothing more than a trick. Mother Superior intervenes in the dispute, telling of the destruction of the members of the order. Apparently, the bishop and abbess have succeeded in convincing the crowd, but suddenly it transpires that half of those assembled are traitors, having defected to Adriel's side. A massacre of fanatics begins in the hall, and Mother Superior succeeds in removing only Francesco and Yasmin. The trio hides in the hotel gymnasium, but they can no longer get out, and Mother Superior calls Camille for help. Ava, Beatrice and Michael arrive at the inn, but the firstborns prove to be too many and the trio fears they cannot win. After examining the photograph of the cross in the spine and noticing a note from Beatrice, Jillian looks at Camilla through the glasses while she prays and sees the same waves that create the portal. The doctor guesses that Adriel is using the power of prayer to gain strength. Having heard the call, surviving nuns of the order arrive at Jillian's house. Ava takes the crowd of firstborns away, and Beatrice and Michael deal with the remaining two. The abbess commands her subjects to leave, but the bishop refuses, determined to expose Adriel to the full. Running from her pursuers, Ava runs through a wall and finds herself outside at a great height. The girl's halo shuts down again and she falls. Beatrice mourns her friend, but she opens her eyes and the artifact begins to glow again. Bishop surrenders to the traitors, hoping they will lead him to Adriel. The imposter angel himself, meanwhile, tells Lilith how much they will accomplish together after they cleanse the world with pain. The master's trust inspires the girl so much that she grows wings. And that concludes episode 5. Come back tomorrow for the next episode. Guys, if you don't want to miss anything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The man opens his eyes in the middle of a lake with a red drone flying overhead. Visions of his family, spaceships, and shootouts flash before him. Finally gathering himself, the man swims towards the shore, accompanied by the drone, which he calls Ezra, to check his mental health. Suddenly cries for help echo from the lake, and another man, followed by a woman, appears. None of them remembers what happened to them. Fina recognizes the wreckage on the shore as the remnants of a warship called Karik, and Ezra recalls an invasion. Then the men discover the remnants of a car that must have been there for centuries. Apparently, there used to be a road in this place. People remember the invasion, and it turns out they all died in different years. Moreover, Abram confesses that he is 67 years old, although he looks 25. According to the red drone, they were brought back to life in their prime years. Their memories are different because they died at different times. Around them is Earth, but 400 years after the extinction of humanity, destroyed by aliens. They were resurrected by creatures living in the water, called sparks. The ultimate goal is the revival of humanity, and the rest of the information can be found in the settlement where the others who have returned live. The drone orders Ezra to collect the sparks. Gathering their meager belongings, the people set off after the drone, trying to understand why the Kariks revived them. Soon they find partially destroyed arches, and Abram rushes to them, rejoicing in his young, strong body. On one of the structures, he sees unknown hieroglyphics and touches them. The man is thrown back, and he admits that he saw everything. Suddenly, the red drone is shot down, and a second shot wounds Abram. The trio runs behind a hill where Ezra, setting up an ambush, captures the pursuer. The man, named Jax, denies the existence of the settlement. The glowing substance on his neck is a skin rider, which is one with the human body. He needs the sparks, but Fina confidently demonstrates her proficiency with a weapon. Abram insists that when he touched the unknown symbols on the arch, he felt the vastness of outer space. But this elicits mockery from Jax, who suddenly frees himself and lunges at Ezra. However, Fina points his own weapon at him. This time they tie the man securely and leave, despite his claim to know Ezra's brother. Soon the team takes shelter in a cave, while others with glowing parasites on their necks are found, including Ezra's brother Silas. Meanwhile, the resurrected people in the cave discuss ways to recreate a human being and wonder where the aliens obtain the initial material. During the night, Abram's wound becomes inflamed. He is lowered into a small pond where the sparks are released. By morning, Abram emerges completely healthy. Fina discusses what happened to Ezra, as she doesn't understand why they chose her out of millions of great people. Soon the resurrected individuals see high walls of a settlement in the distance, but on their way, skin riders with glowing necks catch up to them. Ezra stays behind to delay the pursuit. He manages to do so for a while until he recognizes his brother Silas among them. In the meantime, Fina and Abram reach the settlement's walls, and just when it seems they are destined to be captured, the gates open. A yellow drone neutralizes the skin riders and lets the fugitives inside. It then flies after Ezra, carrying him through the air into the settlement where there's no one around. In response to all their questions, the drone invites them to follow and shows them rows of graves where the settlers rest. Later, the yellow drone opens the doors of an abandoned military base for the people where the previous settlers lived. In the forest, skin riders capture a man who escaped from them. Silas discovers that the glowing creature they call companions has inexplicably stopped functioning in Duncan's neck and promises to fix it. The resurrected individuals learn that the settlers died from a new virus that still spreads throughout the region. The yellow drone asks them to release the sparks into a vessel with water and learns from them that the sparks can create a vaccine if people bring the ingredients found in the living lake. Fina begins to bleed from her nose, and she stays at the base while the men go to the lake. She takes on the task of repairing the damaged red drone. On their way, Ezra tries to understand how the system that brought them back to life works. The drone operates on sparks, but who controls the sparks is unknown. The men reach the lake and release the sparks into the water to collect the necessary ingredients. In the settlement, Ezra's wife Lynn suddenly appears before Fina. She explains that she worked as a nurse during the invasion and can offer help, but then disappears just as suddenly. On the lake's shore, Ezra confesses that one of the skin riders is his brother, meaning these people are also resurrected. He recalls the moment when he first saw the alien spaceship flying overhead and signaled to his brother that he was a worthless, spoiled child. Now he is determined to apologize and try to retrieve Silas. Meanwhile, a hologram of Lynn appears again to Fina, helping her repair the red drone. In the meantime, the yellow drone warns of the approaching skin riders. Ezra asks Abram to run while he himself tries to intercept his brother Silas. However, he gets surrounded and subdued. Regaining consciousness, he finds himself alone with his brother, who admits that he prohibited forcibly transforming him into a skin rider because he wants his brother to join them voluntarily. Each skin rider has a companion on their neck, which teaches the person how to behave correctly and telepathically connects them with others. Thanks to the companion, Silas is now the leader and mentor for the others, whereas in the previous world, he was nobody. Then Silas suddenly falls asleep, signaling Ezra to leave. Ezra meets Abram in the forest, to whom he explains his intention to save his brother. The men return to the lake, where the sparks have created 3 vaccine capsules for them. After consuming their doses, they bring the third one to Fina, whose condition worsens. Lynn asks the red drone to replace her image with someone dear to the girl, and Duncan appears next to Fina. Fina regains consciousness after her friends administer the vaccine. The next day, Abram finds a room that is blocked, revealing a glowing obelisk. Meanwhile, in the forest, Silas argues with Duncan about the purpose of the companion controlling the thoughts of the skin riders in the community because Silas believes it amounts to slavery. In the settlement, Abram learns to read hieroglyphs and understands that the unknown hosts offered to dig up weapons against the skin riders in the forest in exchange for more people for the settlement. Ezra goes to the forest for the excavation. Meanwhile, Silas brings Duncan to an open area where Jax conducts training fights, taunting regular people. Unexpectedly, Duncan defeats Jax. Silas stops the duel and explains that he tested his theory, revealing that humans react faster by a fraction of a second than skin riders. Currently, Duncan has a weak companion, so he makes decisions with just one brain, the human one. In contrast, skin riders with healthy companions have a signal that passes through 2 brains, the humans and the companions, causing a slight delay. The conclusion is that humans will always outperform them in combat. To gain an advantage over humans, Silas plans to perform brain surgery to reduce the signal delay. However, a working drone and a test subject are required for this. In the meantime, the yellow drone brings Ezra to the excavation site, which the Skin Riders immediately learn about. Ezra unearths an item that the yellow drone calls a weapon. In the settlement, Abram, upon touching the obelisk, suddenly realizes that he understands the meaning of the hieroglyphs on it. However, he doesn't yet grasp what this knowledge entails. In the forest, the yellow drone warns Ezra about the approaching Skin Riders. They attempt to flee, but the Skin Riders surround them and take the unearthed weapon. Unexpectedly, the weapon activates and kills one of the Skin Riders. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ezra scatters the rest and escapes. Meanwhile, Fina tries to find out from the red drone why the unknown beings are resurrecting humanity. She requests the revival of Duncan, unaware that he has already been resurrected and has become a Skin Rider. Ezra brings the weapon meant to eliminate Skin Riders to the obelisk, hoping it will help establish contact. However, he refuses to kill the innocent inhabitants until the obelisk explains who they are and what is happening. The drones controlled by the obelisk promise to resurrect Ezra's family if he obeys them in all matters. Ezra has no choice but to comply. Later that night, Fina goes to the obelisk, where she finds Ezra, who, like her, hopes for the return of loved ones. They notice that the weapon unearthed in the forest has opened. The obelisk issues new symbols, instructing Fina to go to the lake to receive new people. However, Skin Riders spot her on the way. As for Abram, the drone tells him about the structure of the glowing companion on the necks of the Skin Riders, which is tightly connected to the human brain through a crystalline structure. The weapon found in the forest destroys these crystals, eliminating the parasite. When a Skin Rider dies, its memory is preserved on the crystal, which is passed down to its ancestor. This is what needs to be found and destroyed. Fina sees Lynn emerging from the lake and helps her get ashore. When Jax appears on the shore, the red drone neutralizes him. The girls attempt to escape but are captured by Duncan, who seizes the red drone and fails to recognize Fina, his beloved from the past. The girls try to flee, but Lynn injures her leg and orders Fina to go to the settlement and fetch her husband. Lynn, on the other hand, falls into the hands of the Skin Riders, who return her to the lake. There, Jax shows how the sparks work, healing her injured leg. But suddenly a stone hits Jax's head, and an unknown little wild girl takes Lynn to her forest dwelling, providing her with shoes and food. However, it turns out the girl cannot speak. During this time, Fina reaches the base and informs Ezra about the resurrection of his wife, Lynn. Despite the yellow drone's warning that when Skin Riders take someone, it's forever, Ezra is determined to rescue her. Jax finds the little wild girl's home, but she has already taken Lynn away. They hide in the forest. At the same time, Ezra contemplates how to disable the force field since the obelisk prevents him from doing so, leaving him unable to leave the gates. Fina admits that she saw Duncan, who is also with the Skin Riders now, and he didn't recognize her. She fears the same will happen to Lynn. Meanwhile, in the forest, Jax tracks the runaways and explains that even the sparks make mistakes, resulting in flawed individuals. He is ready to destroy the little girl, but Lynn persuades him not to do it. At the same time, Silas extracts the crystal companion from the deceased Skin Rider's neck and instructs one of the women to take it to the ancestor. Then, they bring Lynn to him. As for Abram, while communicating with the obelisk, he suddenly surmises that he had lived in this settlement before, which is confirmed by a notebook he found with his own handwriting. Later, Fina speculates that they all have lived here before. The yellow drone confirms this fact and leads Abram to a graveyard where he shows everyone who is buried there, including Ezra's grave. It turns out that he had also been resurrected and lived in the settlement at one point. Then the yellow drone guides Abram to the next grave where he finds himself and encourages him to start a new life honorably. Fina demands that the man bind himself. He agrees but suddenly snatches a weapon from Fina and stuns the Skin Rider standing behind her. At the same time in the bunker, Abram is trying to find out from Yellow where the progenitor is located. However, she does not know, but Jax knows, and he heads to the bottomless lake, dives into it, and emerges in a cave. Meanwhile, Silas is trying to convince Ezra that life in his community is much better than in the bunker. Fina begins to trust Duncan and agrees with his plan. And in the camp, Lynn's escape is discovered. Duncan immediately receives a message about this from other Skin Riders and agrees with Fina's plan to send them on a false trail to enter the camp and save Ezra. The pursuit heads in another direction. Silas demonstrates to his brother the capabilities that a companion gives to the human body. He dips his hand into a vessel with sparks and explains that they cannot kill a companion as it goes against their principles. So if Ezra wants to kill the companion, he will have to kill the person. Fina and Duncan infiltrate the camp and seize the Skin Riders' weapons, and Jax reaches the ancestors' dwelling place. He asks them to explain how the drone works, and several human figures come out to him. Fina and Duncan find Lynn. The girl explains that after being infected by the parasite, she immediately plunged her hand into the sparks and it seems to have helped. Duncan asks the women to leave while he finds Ezra. The ancestors show Jax how the drone works. And in the bunker, Yellow confesses to Abram that not a human lies in one of the graves. Silas proves to Ezra that the obelisk is no better than a companion, as it also subjugates people. He lets slip that all of them, including his brother's wife and daughter, once lived in the settlement. Their conversation is interrupted by Duncan, who, under threat of arms, takes Ezra and leads the group to the settlement by a shortcut. But the protective barrier detecting a companion in Duncan does not let him pass, unlike Lynn. Then Fina ties his hands. But at that moment, the pursuit led by Silas bursts onto the clearing. Duncan pushes Fina behind the barrier, and they with Ezra prepare to fight. Abram runs to the obelisk, and it lets the men through on the condition that Duncan remains in the yard until they figure out how to free him from the parasite. At the same time, the ancestors express concern about Jax's hatred for humans, as they are much better carriers than Kariks, and they advise him to find a compromise. Meanwhile, Duncan confesses that his companion is still weak, but he is gaining strength. He remembers the settlers and confirms that Kylie is alive. Sparks rejuvenate people in the prime of life, but children at the age of their actual death. He also lost a wife and a child, and it was Fina, although the woman does not remember this. Abram explains that they are another generation of the revived. The first one lies in the graves, and they are them too. Jax reprograms the red drone, refusing everything human that was in its memory. Fina unties her husband, but when she falls asleep, Duncan's companion receives a signal from Silas, and he heads to the bunker. There, Abram confesses to Ezra that the drone showed him the memory of another woman he saw a year before the invasion. It feels like someone knew about the invasion and offered people help. He wants to consult with Yellow, but she is nowhere to be found. This happens because Duncan is just locking the drone behind one of the panels. Then he attacks Abram, knocks him out, and heads to the obelisk, despite his human side resisting it. He screams in frustration and Ezra hears him. He runs to him, but Duncan closes the doors and enters symbols that deactivate the force field. Realizing this, Ezra rushes to Fina and they manage to barricade the bunker doors. Duncan's companion comes out in the open and confesses that all this was done for the sake of the weapon he hid. He is ready to reveal where Kylie is now if they hand over the bunker to the Skin Riders. The man is tied up. Outside, the sounds of banging are heard, Skin Riders trying to break down the door. Through Duncan, Silas offers to hand over the bunker. Then he will say where Ezra's daughter is now, because someone from the first settlement managed to avoid death from disease. A debate ensues, resulting in a decision to deactivate the parasite using Lynn's medical knowledge. Jax returns. He expresses his dissatisfaction to Silas, as he could have infected Ezra long ago, but lets him go. Silas cuts off the conversation and orders to continue working on the drone. At this time in the bunker, Lynn tries to figure out how the companion works, and it confesses that it can cause great pain to its master. Ezra and Abram conclude that the settlement existed for at least 10 years, and there must be survivors, otherwise, who buried the fallen. Moreover, Yellow said that a drone is buried in one of the graves. At that moment, the knocking at the door resumes. Ezra remembers that there is electricity in the bunker. Fina digests the cable, and a strong electric shock destroys one of the Skin Riders. At the same time, Abram finds Yellow. Simultaneously, people realize that Duncan is acting as a transmitter, and they move him to another room. As they part, Ezra asks to tell his brother that he loves and believes in him. This message puzzles Silas. Yellow scans Duncan and discovers that the parasite has affected all human organs, and even the sparks cannot save him. Abram tries to get answers from the obelisk. Moreover, Yellow said that Duncan was given access codes, but by whom? The man again remembers that woman in the hospital. She had a drone, sparks, and symbols of knowledge on her bracelet, so something was known before the invasion. At Ezra's request, Yellow shows the image of the woman, and he recognizes his mother Eleanor. Meanwhile, Silas prepares to continue breaking down the doors, but something leads him to the cemetery. Jax, following him, reminds him that he is not human and he should not care about the graves. So he intends to start silencing personalities from him. Silas is arrested. At this time in the bunker, Yellow confesses that Eleanor was one of the initiators of the revival of the human race. Duncan is not lying. Kylie was in the settlement, and only he can say where the survivors are now. Duncan's companion is knocked out with a tranquilizer and the man is tied to a table. While the parasite sleeps, the man comes to and points on the map the direction the survivors went. He advises finding the wild girl and wakes up. After which, Yellow finds the weapon he had hidden earlier. The people notice the silence outside and, opening the doors, kill the sentinels left by the skin riders. Making sure that there is no one else in the yard, Ezra and Lynn say goodbye to their friends and set out to find Kylie. Jax activates the drone, intending to remove the human personality from Silas, and learns about the presence of Ezra and Lynn in the forest. He sends the skin riders to follow the pair. Fina comes to Duncan and admits that she is ready to kill him to free her loved one. However, Yellow knocks him out. The man regains consciousness in the cemetery and is relieved, thinking that Fina could not bring herself to harm him. In fact, Yellow has injected a beacon into his body and now people can track his path. At this time, Ezra and Lynn find the wild girl and ask her to guide them to Kylie. Silas regains consciousness when the red drone informs him that he did the opposite, preserved his personality, and suppressed the parasite's capabilities. At the same time, Ezra and Lynn notice they are being followed and try to evade the skin riders. However, arrows fly from the rocks, the skin riders perish, and the survivors approach the people. Meanwhile, in the camp, Jax leaves Duncan on guard while he and his people follow Ezra and Lynn. They are then scanned for safety, and upon confirmation, the settlement leader Rowan leads them into the camp. She warns them that they do not truly know their daughter. They only remember her up to the age of 6, and they are merely copies of those who lived in the settlement. Abram and Fina dig up a broken drone from the grave, hoping to retrieve data from its memory. Rowan brings Ezra and Lynn to the hidden camp in the mountain caves. Noticing the strange expressions on people's faces, she explains that they both died defending the previous camp from an attack. If it weren't for Lynn, no one would have survived. Silas killed the woman. Fina connects Yellow to the memory of the broken drone, and she promises to show the events of the past. At the camp, Ezra and Lynn's adult daughter arrives. Although she understands what they feel, she refuses to recognize them as her parents. Red notices that Silas is experiencing severe pain. He flies to Duncan, and at that moment in the camp, a bloody Justin appears, who orders him to take the rest of the people and rush to the place where they were ambushed. He carries out the order, and Jax disappears because it was a hologram created by Red. Silas escapes. The real Jax finds the ambush site and orders a search of the rocks. In the bunker, Yellow transports Fina and Abram into a virtual reality of the past settlement, where people go about their daily activities. Jax enters the gates and explains that Silas developed a growth on his neck, after which he attacked his friends. All this happened near the old Karrick ship. Returning to their reality, the people realize that this was the first case of companion infection. Yellow explains that the parasites create a structure similar to fungal spores. Silas likely inhaled them. The parasites themselves were brought by the Karricks, who were their carriers before humans. Meanwhile, a boy from the survivors, Thomas, carelessly falls into the hands of Justin. Silas begins to experience severe pain. Red tries to alleviate his condition and notices Duncan rushing towards the bunker. Apparently, he has discovered his escape and wants to detain Silas. Red leads him another way. At the same time, Thomas learns that he has been infected with the parasite. At the camp, his absence is noticed. Rowan calls a council and Ezra advises them to flee. If Thomas reveals the camp, they will not survive. Yellow shows how Abram proposed to create a virus capable of killing the parasite, although the idea itself belongs to the obelisk. People heatedly discuss this proposal, and many disagree. Lynn suggests splitting up. Those who take the virus should stay in the bunker, as they will be weakened. Rowan speaks against it. Abram realizes that he was the cause of the remaining deaths. In the caves, Ezra urges everyone to leave while he defends them. At this time, Silas reaches the bunker and sees Duncan sitting by a campfire. He lures him into the workshop and locks him in there. Abram is overwhelmed with guilt, runs to the obelisk, and voices his accusations. Suddenly, it creates the image of a second Abram, who says that on the other side of the obelisk are creators who sincerely believed they were saving the settlement. The virus just turned out to be slower than the parasite cells. The second Abram disappears as voices of Ezra and Lynn come from behind the doors. Fina opens the doors, and friends push Silas inside. They immediately disappear as they were holograms created by Red. Silas asks to be heard. The drone supports this request and reports that they cannot destroy the ancestor without Silas. At this point, the boy loses consciousness and they bring him inside. Ezra, Lynn, and the young archers set up an ambush, but Thomas appears, shoots at them, and wounds Kylie's fiancé, Nico. Ezra kills the boy, and upon examining, finds a parasite. Lifting his arrow, he realizes there is something on its tip. At that moment, Jax appears with his people and calls them to battle. Red puts Silas into a coma. Meanwhile, Lynn and Kylie bring the injured Nico inside. Justin orders his man to watch the backup entrance to the cave. Lynn starts treating Nico, but the worst part is that the arrow tip might have a parasite larva. The boy then demands to be killed, as Lynn herself set such rules. Duncan tries to call any of the skin riders for help, and Yellow explains to Fina and Abram that the parasite is killing Silas so that he cannot reveal the way to the progenitor. Then Red admits that he can link the minds of Abram and Silas, which might help reveal the secret. At this time, Kylie decides to help her father patrol. The girl recalls the past and calls Jax his best friend, which greatly surprises Ezra. And his urge to kill arises because the parasites are very afraid that the human inside might take over if he remembers his attachments. Father and daughter return to the cave, and Ezra proposes that his wife, daughter, and Nico take another road while he guards them. After heated arguments, they head to the second exit. Abram enters Silas's mind and finds himself in a church. It turns out that the boy's mind considers the church a sanctuary. Abram admits that Silas will no longer come to himself, and he himself describes the way to the lake of the progenitor. The parasites are interconnected precisely through it. It is the source of their energy, strength, and knowledge. Silas knows for sure humanity will not survive if the lake does not disappear. Ezra resorts to trickery, and Kylie kills a lurking skin rider. The father bids farewell to everyone and stays in the cave. At the same time, Abram and Fina develop a plan to destroy the progenitor. Yellow explains that the weapon consists of 3 parts. 2 of these are standalone weapons, capable of operating independently of each other. However, the top part is dangerous for humans themselves, so it is discarded. Only the lower part remains, which destroys the progenitor. But this part will not work without the middle, where a human personality must be placed. But the progenitor has studied all the skin riders in this world, so the chances of getting into it are slim. And then Abram realizes why Silas was needed. Later, Fina reflects on her promise to Duncan to kill him and free him from the parasite. Then, Yellow admits that her husband is in the workshop in the yard. The woman arms herself and heads to the yard, but just as she is ready to open the door to the workshop, a skin rider enters the yard and releases Duncan. Fina tries to stop the men, but Duncan reminds her that she cannot kill him and leaves. At this time, Abram comes to Silas again and explains that they need his help. Jax decides to attack, realizing that Ezra is the only defender of the camp. He orders his men to engage him while he himself follows the trail of Lynn, Kylie, and Nico. Nico is losing strength, and Lynn decides to make a stretcher, although the boy asks to just leave him. And Ezra sets up an ambush, and one by one eliminates the skin riders, then follows the trail of his wife. Nico transforms and grabs Lynn by the throat. He is ready to kill the woman, but Kylie interferes. The boy's companion admits that the girl is very dear to him, but he cannot indulge the carrier's weaknesses, and when Nico raises his sword, Kylie shoots him. Ezra catches up with them, not knowing that Jax is monitoring their reunion, but he receives a message about Silas's betrayal, and Jax leaves. Silas asks Abram to wait for his death, take his crystal, and insert it into the weapon. Then he will be in the middle part and can help. Abram does not fully understand how it works, but thanks Silas. They say goodbye. Abram comes to his senses when Silas dies, and Jax catches up with Duncan and his men by the lake. After a dispute, he orders everyone to stay in ambush, and he and Duncan will dive to the progenitor. Meanwhile, Lynn and Ezra bury Nico and console their daughter. Simultaneously, Fina and Abram bury Silas. Later, the groups meet, unaware that a black drone is watching them, which takes off above the earth and heads for a spacecraft. Abram tells Ezra everything that happened with his brother and the plan to destroy the progenitor, but he does not want to endanger his family. Yellow vaccinates Kylie, explaining that the vaccine was made by Sparks. The girl tells Fina that Duncan became a skin rider after her death, and no one knows how it happened. At the same time, Abram admits that he no longer believes in the obelisk, but he believes in Silas and is ready to do everything to destroy the progenitor. He tells Ezra about the weapons operation. A part of Silas will guide them inside, but what to do next, he doesn't know. Ezra laughs at such a plan, and his daughter hears this. Abram and Fina try to convince Ezra that this is why they were resurrected. Otherwise, humanity is doomed. But they cannot persuade him. Then Abram and Fina leave together. Ezra is tormented by guilt, although Lynn tries to remind him of his duty to his family. At this time, Kylie is reviewing the map to the progenitor's lake and secretly leaves the bunker. Red informs the parents that he cannot find the girl, and they, realizing where she has gone, rush after her. Meanwhile, Kylie catches up with Fina and Abram, and later Ezra and Lynn appear. Thus they all come together again. But at the lake itself, they fall into an ambush by the Skin Riders. A battle ensues in which the group of survivors wins, but Abram is seriously wounded. However, Kylie has Sparks with her, and she suggests releasing them into the lake. As they start doing this, Duncan emerges from the water and shoots Lynn and Kylie. Fina, under the cover of a shield, rushes to him, and they both disappear under the water. Ezra releases the Sparks and brings the wounded into the water. Then a wounded Fina emerges, saying she couldn't overcome Duncan. Ezra dives and finds a wounded Duncan, who has reverted to his true self before death. He apologizes and loses consciousness, and Ezra sees in front of him a glowing something with crystals and fits the lower part of the weapon onto one of them. Then he inserts Silas's little crystal into the middle part of the weapon and looks for the place where it needs to be placed. But then Jax appears. He has always hated his carrier and all humans, and he will not let the progenitor be destroyed. The men engage in combat, and just as Jax is about to win, the revived Duncan attacks him. Ezra finds the right crystal and fits the middle part of the weapon onto it, and suddenly finds himself in a room where he is met by Silas. The brother explains that they are inside the progenitor, and only he could create this home in this place. He is a Trojan horse from which destruction will enter the progenitor. Ezra picks up the box with the symbol of knowledge from his mother and realizes that it is a detonator. The brother says goodbye to him, and when Jax appears, they activate the bomb. Ezra finds himself in the cave where the progenitor is destroyed, to Jax's great sorrow. The man emerges and finds his loved ones healed. Their elation is washed by a black drone, which again heads to the spaceship, where it is met by Eleanor and Duncan. They realize that the deed is done and humanity has a chance. Despite some illogicality, the story is quite extraordinary. It's not about battles with aliens, as the Kuriks are only briefly shown once in a flashback, and not about humans' attempts to cunningly escape the dictate of their rule. At the heart is the question of the value of a person, the preservation of which can lead to peace and the rebuilding of civilization. Spiderhead is an ultra-modern prison that resembles more of a hotel.
This is science, Jeff. We're making the world a better place.
In this facility, inmates live under a more relaxed regime, have the right to take walks, interact with each other, and have the opportunity to reduce their sentences and receive bonuses. But it all comes at a price. Spiderhead carries out medical trials, and not all of them are harmless. To be fair, it must be said that all experiments are voluntary, and each inmate has the right to refuse and return to a standard cell in another prison. Ray, one of the inmates, sits in a chair in front of a mirrored window, and Steve announces the start of the experiment by injecting a substance into Ray's bloodstream. Just a minute later, they administered the first dose of the drug to the subject and begin reciting simple jokes, causing Ray to burst into hysterical laughter. When the jokes are replaced by grim facts, the subject's reaction remains the same. Ray continues to laugh hysterically. Another morning in Spiderhead is no different from the previous ones. Inmates are awakened by a loudspeaker and their names immediately announced for participation in the experiments. Steve inquires of Jeff if he's willing to try the new N40 compound on himself, which no one has ever tried before, and the guy readily agrees to participate in the experiment. In addition to the test drug, another one is administered to enhance the speech centers of the brain. This allows Jeff to describe his state in great detail, mentioning the smallest details. Returning to the Spiderhead compound, Jeff meets Lizzie and tells her about his walk today. Unfortunately, he can't recount everything he saw because after taking the substance that enhances vocabulary, a side effect occurs. Jeff can't say even a few words. The only thing the guy remembers is that everything that surrounded him during the experiment, whether it was flowers or factory pipes, elicited the strongest feelings of love and admiration in him. In the evening, while sitting in bed, Jeff recalls how he ended up in prison. He and his friend decided to go for a joyride at the party, and the intoxicated Jeff took the wheel. The next day, the N40 trials, now called Cupid, continue, but this time Jeff is not alone. Heather, a bold girl who changes her mind about her partner after just a few seconds of drug administration, is invited to join him. The couple's conversation lasts only a few seconds before they cannot resist and engage in intimacy. They don't care that they're being observed and filmed, as the substance completely disconnects their minds from their internal barriers. The process concludes with the young people confessing their love for each other, which delights Steve, and he instructs his partner Mark to closely monitor the subjects to see how they behave when the effects of the substance wear off. The couple feels awkward after what happened and tries not to talk to anyone about it. Jeff continues to spend his free time with Lizzie, not telling her about what happened during the experiments, and he avoids encounters with Heather. The next day, they administered the same Cupid to Jeff, but this time in a double dose, and instead of Heather, an older woman is in the room, whom sober Jeff looks at with disgust. However, as soon as the substance enters his bloodstream, he engages in love with her. After this experiment, Jeff asks Mark to remove him from the kitchen where they work together with Lizzie because he feels uncomfortable continuing to interact with his girlfriend. Steve brings Jeff into the laboratory, but this time he is on the other side of the glass. Steve shows Jeff that both of his previous partners are in the experiment room. The supervisor offers Jeff the choice of which girl he is willing to administer the substance that induces intense fear and pain to, but Jeff cannot choose. He is indifferent to both of the girls and he cannot wish harm upon them. In the end, they simply release the girls, canceling the experiment. Having the right to another Friday walk, Jeff calls his girlfriend who was with him on the night of the accident, but once again he only gets the voicemail. In the evening, Jeff spends time with Lizzie, arranging a small Christmas surprise for her. When Jeff finds himself in the familiar chair in the laboratory, he sees Rogan in front of him, a massive inmate covered in tattoos. Jeff recalls everything that happened with the girls in the previous days and refuses the experiment. Nothing happens, and the men are simply released after a couple of minutes of silence. Jeff realizes what has just occurred. He and Rogan were partners with one of the female inmates, and she was supposed to choose which one of them would receive meds. Bursting into Steve's office, Jeff confirms his suspicions upon seeing Heather there. Furthermore, the doctor does not even argue with the inmate. On the contrary, he shows him a diagram of who is supposed to get close to whom under the influence of the drug. In response to Jeff's complaints, Steve reminds him that being in Spiderhead is a privilege, and if he's not satisfied, he can transfer to a regular prison, albeit without hope of early release. Understanding the hint, the next time, Jeff sits calmly in the same room as Rogan without any hysterics. Steve sends Mark on a weekend break, advising his friend to enjoy his time on the mainland. Steve himself decides to take the Cupid to experience the ecstasy he had only seen in his subjects before. The experiments continue, and Steve warns Jeff that they will have to administer dark influx to the girls, as a certain committee demands the purity of the experiment. Jeff tries to explain that he does not wish for anyone to experience the effects of this substance regardless of his feelings for the girls. However, Steve remains adamant and reminds Jeff of all the privileges that he enjoys by cooperating with them. Not wanting to go back to a regular prison, Jeff agrees to administer dark influx to Heather. Heather begins to cry and panic, but the management calmly records the data, listening to Jeff's comments, which did not contain any hint of romantic feelings. The experiment's goal is achieved and Steve plans to conclude it, but an error occurs and Heather goes out of control. She gets hold of a sharp object and frees herself from the torment caused by the darkened flocks. While Steve and Mark are busy with Heather, Jeff notices the lost keys belonging to the supervisor and finds a notebook with records of upcoming experiments and a lottery ticket with the same numbers as the names of the meds being administered. Seeing that Steve is no longer behind the glass, Jeff manages to lock the safe and toss the keys back so that the doctor does not realize that his secret is exposed. Steve warns Mark that if anyone finds out about what happened to Heather and he has to answer for it, he will drag everyone who participated in the experiment down with him. Lizzie participates in the experiments for the first time, and the first thing they administer to her is darkened flocks. After experiencing it, she meets with Jeff in a secluded place and shares her feelings with him. Lizzie confesses that she's not sure if Spiderhead is better than a regular prison with the strictest regime. In turn, Jeff also opens up to his girlfriend and confesses that on the night of the accident there was not only his friend in the car but also his beloved girlfriend who did not survive the ride. That's why he willingly undergoes the trials on himself, hoping to somehow atone for his guilt. The candid conversation between the two of them leads to them spending the night together. Steve quickly deduces the close relationship between his wards and decides to use this connection for his own purposes. When Jeff arrives for the next experiment, he learns that today he must either agree to administer darkened flocks to Lizzie or leave Spiderhead. Jeff refuses, but the doctor gives him a chance to postpone the experiment until the morning. When he meets the defiant young man again, he is armed with Lizzie's personal file. It turns out that the crime for which the girl is serving time is so terrifying for her that no amount of darkened flocks can make it worse. Steve watches with pleasure as Jeff adjusts the dosage scale to the maximum. However, it quickly becomes apparent to him that Jeff intends to experiment on him, not on his girlfriend. Mark, realizing that he has also fallen into Steve's trap with the inmates, decides to rectify the situation and hands the remote control to Jeff. The inmate receives all the necessary information from Steve and persuades him to open the main exit so that he and Lizzie can leave the prison. But the manager grabs the remote control and administers the maximum dose of darkened flocks to the girl, causing her intense suffering. He then smashes his cell phone to prevent anyone from canceling his command. The couple manages to free themselves from the effects of the meds and run out of the laboratory. At the same time, Steve announces over the loudspeaker that because of the fugitives, everyone else will be sent back to prisons where their comfortable lives will come to an end. Jeff and Lizzie become the targets of a manhunt. Dozens of hardened criminals, including the massive tattooed Rogan, plan to deal with the couple who deprived them of all the privileges of the facility. Steve tries to escape with the meds because police boats called by Mark are about to approach Spiderhead. Steve manages to leave the base and take off in a small plane before the police arrive. But since his remote control is shattered, meds are injected into his bloodstream in massive quantities. Another release of Cupid induces admiration, and the man steers the plane towards a tiny rocky island, seeing it as a paradise. Mark, on the police boat, watches as his former boss circles above the sea and then crashes into the rocks. Jeff and Lizzie hijack a boat and manage to sail away before the police arrive. Happy and free, the young couple regrets only that Steve did not invent a substance that could induce self-forgiveness. And that's how the movie ends. The crew of the spaceship is in cryogenic sleep. Astronaut George Taylor is dictating his final report. Exactly half a year ago by the ship's time, they left Cape Canaveral. Over 7 centuries have passed on Earth during this period. The people who sent them on this journey have long since died. But Taylor has no regrets about what they've done. Everything seems different from here. The flow of time is distorted and space is limitless. The only thing he would like to know is whether humanity, the miracle of the universe that sent him into the sky, continues to wage war. A last glance at the clock. It's March 27, 2673 on Earth. He looks at his comrades and lies down in his place. After a while, the ship makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet and finds itself in the middle of a body of water. The crew wakes up and realizes that they have slept much longer than the calculated time. But the most horrifying shock is the death of the only woman, Stewart. At that moment, water begins to enter the ship. They need to evacuate, especially since the samples showed that the atmosphere is suitable for breathing. Looking at the ship's clock, which is frozen at Earth time, November 25, 3978, the crew abandons the sinking ship. Boarding a life raft, the humans sail to shore, marveling at the grandeur of the surrounding nature. There is no sign of intelligent life anywhere. Taylor reminds them that they are 320 light-years from Earth on an unknown planet in the constellation Orion. It is impossible to determine more precisely as no one has had time to look at the instrument readings. Upon landing on the shore, Taylor takes inventory of what they were able to salvage from the ship. A pistol, 20 rounds of ammunition, a first aid kit, and a 3-day supply of food and water. The only question now is how long is a day here? They are discussing the strange death of Stewart, apparently caused by depressurization. It seems they were flying for 18 months, while on Earth it has been about 2,000 years. There is no hope of returning, and time has erased everything they knew. Therefore, they need to start studying this planet. Analysis show that nothing can grow here as there is very little carbon dioxide. But there is nothing dangerous to human health either. They have 72 hours left until they run out of food. Landon sets up a small flag of the United States of America on the shore and the astronauts set off on their journey. The surroundings are strange and wild, bizarre rocks and lifeless canyons. The people almost get trapped under landslides several times. Thunderbolts light up the sky without bringing rain, and the sky itself is covered with clouds with no satellites or landmarks. One thing they know for sure, there's a time gap between them and Earth. Their loved ones died 20 centuries ago. Even if they returned, no one would remember them. Taylor urges his comrades on. Why did they embark on this flight? Was it for fame, new knowledge, or the opportunity to live longer? But now they have lived much longer than any other human on Earth. Only Taylor set out on this journey because he's a dreamer. He is confident that there must be something better than humans in the universe. At that moment, Dodge calls out to them. He has found life. A barely noticeable green shoot has sprouted from rocky desert. This means there are plants here and they need to find them. The group continues forward. Everywhere they look, they see unfriendly rocks, but ahead they see green bushes and some strange crosses that resemble scarecrows. After walking a little further, the astronauts are thrilled to finally see water ahead. The excited group quickly sheds their clothes and jumps in. After that, they swim towards the shore and notice human footprints on the sand. Suddenly, they see dark figures stealing their clothes. The men chase after the thieves, who leave behind obvious traces of their path such as broken clothing and scraps. Soon they come across their torn clothes and put on whatever remains. Finally, they reach a plain and see many people behaving quite strangely. They are silent and pay no attention to the astronauts, instead calmly gathering and eating different fruits. The Earthlings are puzzled as their fellow humans seem almost feral. Luckily, they are not cannibals. Suddenly, an ominous sound comes from the forest and the people start running. The astronauts try to understand what is happening and suddenly see armed riders. Shots are fired and then monkeys appear on the clearing, apparently hunting the humans. The Earthlings attempt to flee and in the heat of the chase they split up. Shots are heard from all directions and Dodge is killed. Taylor, along with others, runs towards the river, and just when it seems like he's about to make it, one of the monkeys shoots him in the neck, rendering him unconscious. The tied-up astronaut is thrown into a cell with other prisoners. He's surprised to see the monkeys taking pictures as if it's a souvenir. George is brought to a hospital where he's examined by scientist monkeys. They examine Taylor, who's wearing strange clothing. But two chimpanzees argue about the need to study the animal's brains, ignoring Taylor, who's still recovering from his throat wound and unable to speak. In the morning, Dr. Zyra does her rounds. She's intrigued by a strange animal she calls Bright Eyes because he pretends to talk in a hilariously convincing way. Taylor tries to demonstrate that he's intelligent and attempts to snatch the pencil from Zyra's hand. At that moment, Dr. Zaius enters. Zyra shows him the exceptional human, but Zaius is skeptical and sees him merely imitating. Zyra tries to draw attention to the human's uniqueness by highlighting his unconventional use of a blanket as clothing and his unusual hand movements. perhaps he's intelligent. But Zaius is irritated, dismissing it all as cheap tricks. Humans are dangerous and must be destroyed. Later, they bring a female human as a gift and lock her in Taylor's cell. The next day, George and his companion are walking in the yard in a large cage. Zyra brings her fiancé, an archaeologist named Cornelius, to show him Taylor, but Cornelius sees nothing special about him. While the apes argue, George writes in the sand, but nobody pays attention to him. At that moment, Dr. Zaius arrives, annoyed at Zyra with her human again. Suddenly, a wild man attacks George and a fight breaks out. The guards drag Taylor away and Zaius sees the letters George wrote but quickly erases them. Zyra apologizes to Taylor, but he snatches the paper and pencil and writes his name on the piece of paper. Zyra is astonished and takes him home. Cornelius doesn't believe her stories. It's all just tricks. Humans can't write. They try to figure out where he learned it and Taylor writes the name of his school. The apes are shocked. Could he really be intelligent? The man explains that they came from another planet. Cornelius is puzzled, but flying is impossible. Then Taylor crafts a paper airplane. Afterwards, he asks to see the maps and explains where they landed and how they got there. Zyra and Cornelius argue fervently. She claims that humans are a mutation, the missing link between apes and monkeys, and it is quite possible that monkeys evolved from humans. Dr. Zaius, who enters the scene, discovers the paper airplane, crushes it, and orders the man to be taken to a cell. Taylor and Nova sleep in their cell when the arriving apes order Taylor to be prepared for a castration operation, but the man breaks free and runs out of the cell. He manages to hide in the ape temple but is noticed, and the man has to run through the ape city again. Taylor ends up in a museum where stuffed humans are exhibited. Shocked, he runs out into the street but gets caught in a net, where Zyra finds him. And then the voice returns to Taylor, shocking the apes. Later in the cell, Taylor tries to teach Nova how to speak, but the apes take the girl away and put her in the cell across from him. The man tells her about his life on Earth, but he didn't love anyone there. He wonders if Nova can love. The apes put a collar on him and take him to trial. A hearing is now taking place, and Zyra and Cornelius are ready to act as his attorneys. The judges are outraged. He has no rights because he's not an ape. But then what is he being tried for? The court gives a continuance to his lawyers, but Taylor intends to defend himself. A theologian scientist is called to testify, trying to prove the man's irrationality as he does not know the answers to the simplest questions. But Taylor cannot know them as he has not studied their culture. A person is prohibited from speaking, so he writes his statement and submits it to the court. Cornelius reads that Taylor is a space explorer and arrived from another planet, but the apes do not believe him. They demand to bring the people captured with him. And Taylor sees Landon, but he does not recognize his friend, and the scar is found on his head. George realizes that Dr. Zaius destroyed the man's brain. George is dragged back to the court. And then Cornelius defends Taylor. He did not lie when he said he came from the Forbidden Zone. He described it very accurately, and Cornelius himself was there, and he found traces of ancient ape culture. Zyra continues the defense. If he did not come from another planet, he was born on this one. She found no reason why people cannot speak. The problem is not in anatomy but in the brain, and that is the truth, but nobody wants to listen. Zyra and Cornelius are accused of scientific heresy and the tribunal is closed. The fate of the man is predetermined. He is handed over to Zaius, who intends to perform operations on him. George is outraged. How could such an upside-down civilization arise? And most importantly, why is Zaius so afraid of him? Zyra cannot accept this and organizes the escape of Taylor and Nova. Outside the city, Cornelius meets them with horses and supplies. He suggests returning to the spacecraft landing site. A small caravan sets off and reaches the river. If they follow it, they will reach the sea. Soon they reach the place where Cornelius was excavating. He's ready to take the man to the cave. And then Zyra sees the pursuit. Dr. Zaius, who caught up with the fugitives, is in for an unpleasant surprise. Taylor is armed. The Earthling offers a compromise to the doctor. If Cornelius can prove that their culture is not the oldest and originated from humans, he will leave them alone. Everyone goes into the cave. While Cornelius shows off his findings, Taylor discovers spare parts of a human, a dental plate, glasses, and a heart valve. But the main discovery is a human doll that says the word mama. Zayas tries to find a reasonable explanation when gunshots are heard outside. Everyone rushes to the exit. It's the makeshift doctors who, unable to keep their words, have attacked the fugitives' escorts. Taylor takes Dr. Zayas hostage and orders everyone to leave. Taylor will release him in exchange for a horse, food, and water for him and his woman. But before leaving, he asks the doctor why he always feared him, and he answers because he's a man, and that his ancestors are to blame for the lifeless forbidden lands, for he is the lowest and most treacherous beast. The people leave and the doctor orders the cave to be blown up and Zyra and Cornelius to be arrested. He saves the future of his people. Taylor and Nova ride along the beach. Suddenly, the man jumps off the horse in horror. He has returned, and they did it after all. They blew them all up and destroyed civilization, let them burn in hell. Nova looks at Taylor in fear. She doesn't understand what is before her, the upper part of the Statue of Liberty rising on the ocean shore. The film is based on the book by French writer Pierre Boulle, who considered his novel one of his least successful works and therefore had serious doubts about its success on the big screen. But in the end, the film ranked 350th on Empire magazine's list of the 500 greatest films. The movie begins in Leningrad in 1940. A young woman named Anya works as a seamstress in a factory where a young machinist, Vasily, who is very serious, notices her and even asks her to introduce him to her only relative, her brother Peter. However, Anya asks for a little more time, and the young man agrees to wait until the next day. But as the girl leaves for her lunch break, he quietly follows her, admiring her. Anya walks down the street, looking at a dirigible hovering above, from which German journalists are filming the city below. At this moment, a tram driven by Peter pulls up to an intersection. Suddenly, Anya realizes that a fast-moving truck is about to crash into the tram, and her brother will likely perish. Frozen in fear, she suddenly emits light waves that lift the truck into the air and throw it away from the intersection. The tram's windows shatter, injuring people, but a major accident is averted. This entire incident is captured on film by the journalists in the dirigible. As the shocked people try to recover, Peter jumps out of the tram, grabs Anya, and quickly takes her away. The girl regains consciousness in their shared room. Peter packs their belongings, urging his sister to flee Leningrad, although she is reluctant since they have already had to move several times due to her supernatural abilities manifesting at the most inappropriate times and attracting the attention of the authorities. Peter asks her to control her powers, but Anya is unable to master them as they are beyond her control. At that moment, representatives of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs burst into the room and arrest the siblings. An investigator named Ivan arrives at the scene. He interviews the victims, and one of the women recalls the strange girl standing at the crossroad. Back at the office, Ivan begins interrogating Anya, but she cannot provide any concrete information. She insists it was just an unfortunate accident, and then Ivan shows her photos from their previous residences where strange incidents and destruction occurred, prompting the siblings to move hastily. The investigator is willing to believe she is not a criminal, especially since he has also witnessed something very strange in his life. However, Ivan is unable to elaborate as his superior, Petrov, who turns out to be his father-in-law, takes Anya and leads her to the secret facilities managed by Professor Ilinsky. The scientist welcomes the girl, explaining that she is special and now they will study her abilities. However, Anya refuses to cooperate until she sees her brother, and Ilinsky promises to arrange a meeting for them. Meanwhile, Ivan cannot calm down, although Petrov, who is also his father-in-law, demands he forget the incident and focus on other matters. He had already barely managed to suppress his absurd report about an incident in Madrid. Returning home, Ivan tries to tell everything to his wife Vera, but she asks him to take a vacation and forget everything that happened. The action shifts to 1936. A group of Soviet soldiers, including Ivan, engages in battle with Spanish fascists in Madrid. Suddenly, a man in a strict coat and hat, wearing a strange mask, appears before them. Looking at the soldiers, he utters something incomprehensible, after which Ivan's comrades start shooting themselves one by one. Only Ivan finds the strength to shoot at the man in the mask. The man quickly disappears, leaving Ivan amidst his fallen comrades. The year is 1940. A man in a mask named Neumann and his assistant Katerina arrive in Munich, where the woman meets a Jewish boy named Baruch on the street who plays chess brilliantly. She offers him a ride with them, noting he can always leave if he does not like their school. An orphan agrees and gets into the car, where Neumann utters several hissing words, causing Baruch to fall asleep instantly. Neumann agrees that the boy is brilliant, but by no means possesses superpowers. However, Katerina is determined to help the boy. Meanwhile in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to the laboratory where she will be studied and, fulfilling his promise, brings her to a cell to see her brother. Peter again asks her not to show her abilities, and she promises to write to him. Baruch is brought to an ancient castle owned by Neumann. The boy is laid in a hammock in a hall inhabited by many other teenagers, but when the adults leave, he wakes up and is frightened by the dark silhouettes surrounding him. Back in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to a separate room, more like a cell, and locks her in there. He then reports to Petrov that he has never seen anything like it. The girl is a scientific discovery, a unique case, to which the chief objects. She is a new weapon. Later, Anya is subjected to various tests, but she shows nothing special. Ivan cannot forget the incident, studying everything related to the strange explosion. The video footage of the accident also reaches Neumann, and he decides to fly to the USSR. There, the man is taken to meet with Professor Ilyinsky. Neumann introduces himself as a worker from the Ahnenerbe organization and immediately determines that the professor is terminally ill. He offers to ease his pain if the professor allows him to speak with Anya. Ilyinsky does not believe in his abilities, but Neumann utters something, and glowing waves emanate from him, enveloping the professor, causing him to lose consciousness. Taking advantage of this, Neumann searches his desk and takes some papers. Soon, Ilyinsky regains consciousness, but strangely feels no pain. He agrees to arrange a meeting with Anya and leads the German to the laboratory. Neumann approaches the girl and secretly shows her an execution order for her brother. Then waves of unprecedented force begin to emanate from the girl, literally blowing up the entire laboratory. Neumann grabs her and escapes. Ivan sees from the window a man in a hat whom he immediately recognizes and runs to the laboratory where explosions are heard, but Neumann and the girl are nowhere to be found. The narrative shifts to 1924. In a remote Karelian village, a woman lives with two children, Peter and Anya. One day they go with the village boys into the forest. Suddenly a pack of wolves leaps out at the children. The children freeze in fear, but waves emanate from Anya, scattering the beasts. When the men arrive at the clearing, they find the girl dead. 1940. Petrov enters the devastated laboratory, where people connected by tubes into a single organism and marked with the letter M lie in chairs. At first glance, this structure was not damaged by the explosion, as the injured Ilyinsky lying nearby confirms. The professor reports that Anya caused all this and refuses to continue the experiments. Then, Petrov shoots him. Afterward, he goes to Ilyinsky's colleague, who everyone simply calls Professor Lyubov. Petrov asks her to activate the M squad. Learning about the professor's death, the woman refuses to help Petrov, but he reminds her of her family, and Lyubov reluctantly agrees. On the train, a customs officer searches Neumann's compartment and finds an iron sarcophagus with Anya inside. Unsure of what to do, he goes for help. Meanwhile, Anya envisions her own funeral following the incident with the wolves. Frightened, she comes to, and Neumann informs her that he is saving her. Anya tries to run, but the customs officers, who decided to detain the strange German, stop her. However, he utters something, and the military personnel bring their pistols to their own heads. Neumann and Anya leave. At the same time in Moscow, Petrov reports to his colleagues that a member of the Ahnenerbe, which translates to ancestral heritage, Neumann has stolen a valuable exhibit from the USSR, the girl Anya. A squad has already been formed to pursue the German and will depart in a matter of days. Learning of this, Ivan requests to be included, but Petrov, feeling sorry for his daughter, refuses to do so. Neumann leads Anya to a spot where Katerina's car is waiting, and she drives the pair to the castle. It is apparent that the woman does not like Neumann's new toy, but he immediately says that Anya is just like him. At the castle, they are greeted by children whom Neumann calls his army. Anya is escorted to her room, and Neumann finds a guest in his office, Admiral Canaris, who is very interested in the scientist's research. But today he has come to express his displeasure with Neumann's sabotage in the USSR, as it could start a war. Newman reassures him and invites him to a formal dinner. Meanwhile, Anya is startled by a sound and sees Baruch in her room, trying to open her window to escape the castle. But Katerina and Newman appear and stop him. While Katerina takes the boy away, Newman tries to convince Anya that the castle is a paradise, and no one wants to leave of their own volition. Katerina brings Baruch to a bedroom, reminding him that he must speak only German and not tell anyone his real name if he wants to live. But when she leaves, the other teenagers attack him. In Moscow, Ivan asks his wife to help him get enrolled in the squad, after which he goes to Professor Lyubov. He is interested in whether hypnosis can make a person do what another wants. The professor asks him not to travel to Germany, but he is determined to find the man in the mask. In the castle, Anya finds Baruch hanging. The boy tries to explain that the others hate him and beat him, therefore he wants to run away. But Anya admits that it was the same for her until she became strong, and he can too. Later they find Neumann in the park, who promises Anya he will teach her to control her power. He explains that he inherited the castle from the person who adopted him, and now it serves as a refuge. He has set up Anya's room according to her taste and hopes she will like it here. Grateful, Anya sits down at the sewing machine, unexpectedly remembering how the villagers burned their house, calling her a witch. Then her brother saved her, though their mother died in the fire. Back in Moscow, Petrov enrolls Ivan in the squad and asks the commander to ensure that he does not return. Leningrad, 1937. Returning from Madrid, Ivan writes in his report everything he witnessed, but Petrov does not believe him, noting that if the soldiers shot themselves, they could be declared deserters. Tired of trying to convince the young man, Petrov takes him to Professor Lyubov. 1940. A special forces unit travels to Germany in a grain car. Ivan warns his comrades about Neumann's peculiarities, but it seems they don't quite believe him. At the castle, the children undergo daily training, while Anya enjoys the long-forgotten peace. In the morning, Katerina brings her a box with a new dress sent by Neumann for her to wear at his birthday party. The girl goes out to the hall where the children are preparing decorations for the evening, and then they head to training. Baruch is afraid of heights and falls from a rope ladder, but no one pities him. After that, it's time for shooting practice, but the boy throws his pistol down and runs to the local cemetery where Neumann finds him. Baruch asks to be let go, but the scientist promises to teach him not to be afraid. Meanwhile, Squad M climbs out of the wagon, and Ivan remembers his training in 1936 before being sent to Madrid. Then his comrades met him coldly because he was the boss's son-in-law, but Ivan earned respect through hard work and cleverness. And now he is on a special mission. Suddenly, they are hailed by an old man who turns out to be their liaison and must take them to the castle. At the same time, Petrov is informed that the squad has successfully crossed the border. Guests start arriving at the castle. Neumann welcomes Canaris and escorts him to the hall where music plays, and ladies and gentlemen drink and talk about the beautiful evening. Neumann himself is enchanted by Anya's beauty, and she gives him a hand-embroidered handkerchief she made for him. Later, guests deliver laudatory speeches in honor of the birthday boy, and he invites Anya to dance to the envy of the present ladies. Canaris notices Katerina's displeasure, but the woman remains cold, rejecting his advances. She dislikes Canaris's interest in their wards, and he tells her that people are already coming for Anya from the USSR. Squad M reaches the forest house of their liaison, who supplies them with weapons and draws a path on a map, but then shots ring out. German soldiers have caught up with the saboteurs. A battle ensues and the Russians win. Later, the commander finishes off the wounded enemies and, unexpectedly for Ivan, shoots the liaison, indicating that they have no orders to return. At the castle, Canaris agrees to play chess with Baruch, and the boy wins. The admiral admires his genius, but upon learning that the boy is Jewish, he pulls out a pistol. Anya sees the man aiming at the child, and her powers activate. Guests watch in horror as everything in the hall begins to rise into the air. The admiral himself is lifted up, but at that moment Neumann grabs the girl by the shoulder. She faints, and Canaris falls to the floor. Everything stops immediately, but people scream and scatter. The furious admiral orders all children to be destroyed within 3 days and departs. Neumann escorts Anya to her room and admires her because today she managed to stop. The girl does not understand why it is necessary to destroy the Jews, and Neumann reminds her that no one pitied them either, as they were not like everyone else. The man returns to his office where Katerina awaits him, but he does not accept her attentions because he is seriously captivated by Anya and hopes to succeed with her. However, Katerina is saddened by this turn in their relationship and reminds him of Canaris's order, but Neumann intends to make a profitable deal. The action shifts to Numeno's childhood when children laughed at him and drove him away. His parents were forced to put a mask with a digital lock on him so he couldn't harm anyone, and the boy suffered greatly from this. One day his father complained to the landlord that his son was hindering his ability to fulfill his duties as a tenant, and the man came to see the unusual child. They explained to him that Neumann scared all the guests and caused his father to lose a finger. The year is 1940. The morning after the dinner, Anya goes out to the hall, but the servants who witnessed yesterday's incident look at her warily. Then the girl goes to the park where she is met by an armed Katerina, but seeing the guards, she returns to the house. Later, Neumann conducts a meditation for the teenagers, asking Thor to give them strength. Anya sees this and asks for permission to start training. Neumann orders Katerina to stay at the castle and wait for guests, and he takes Anya away. Meanwhile, the squad continues to move through the forest. Soon they find a rubber boat at the prearranged place. Neumann puts Anya on his personal plane and takes her to his parents' house. Landing, they walk across a bridge and suddenly Neumann asks the girl to remember her brother. Her powers activate. Water rises up, carrying fish and creating a reverse waterfall. But then the man calls her, Anya comes to her senses, and everything returns to normal. However, now she can use her powers when she needs to. Soon they enter an old house and Neumann recalls how he was taken from his father's home. Lastly, his mother writes down the password to his mask on a piece of paper, and little Neumann leaves their lives forever. In the present, he tells that his father was a harsh and cruel man, often beating him and his mother, so he promised himself that his child would never be unhappy. The man remembers how his patron removed his mask and wanted to throw it away, but Neumann did not allow it. The man informed him that he would now take care of him, but he must trust him. Soon they arrived at the castle, where the patron confessed that every person has the right to be happy, and the boy lived for the first time like a normal child. But a year later, war came. His patron went away on business, and their home turned into a hospital. Neumann helped as best he could. Once he had to assist in the amputation of a leg. The soldier was in great pain, and then Neumann activated his powers and relieved the poor man of his suffering during the operation. Later he confessed to one of the nurses that he loved her. The adult woman laughed at the boy but said she loved him too. But one day he caught his nurse with one of the recovering soldiers, and in a fit of rage he made the soldier kill himself with a hammer. They caught him, gagged him, tied him up, and took him away from the castle. In 1940 he tells Anya that his parents died, so he is so happy to have found her. The girl lights candles in the fireplace, using her new powers which delights Neumann. They drink wine and then become close. At night, Anya dreams where Baruch dies and wakes up terrified. She asks Neumann to return to the castle. Meanwhile, the squad reaches the river. One of the soldiers is wounded and runs out of strength. Then he takes his own life so as not to be a burden to his comrades. Only 3 remain, but they still row towards the castle. And there Katerina, who can't sleep, reminisces about the past when she helped her mother, who worked in a psychiatric hospital, where one day they brought in a tied-up boy named Neumann. She then freed him, and he promised never to harm her. The year is 1936, Leningrad. Petrov attends a lecture by Professor Ilyinsky, where he discusses a significant discovery in the field of controlling human memory and emotions. Ilyinsky's colleague, Professor Lyubov, is inspired by the future changes, as people with good mental health will be able to work better and create a brilliant future for themselves and their children. The Project M envisions a new society where happy people with immense productivity and willpower will live. Petrov asks about the use of these discoveries in the military sphere, arguing that if a new society is to be built, it must be able to defend itself. However, Lyubov categorically opposes totalitarianism. After the lecture, Petrov offers Ilyinsky full support for their program if he agrees to operate under military auspices. But Ilyinsky sends him to Lyubov as the ideational inspiration behind the project. However, the woman flatly refuses to cooperate with the military. That same day, she is hit by a car in the street. Later, Petrov returns to Ilyinsky, informing him of the unfortunate accident with his colleague, and Ilyinsky reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Again, 1940-year Germany. The 3 remaining members of the squad reach the castle's territory. Surprised by the lack of security, they enter the premises. Petrov receives a summary of incidents in a specific area of Germany and realizes that everything is going according to plan. His boss is horrified. His people have left a very noticeable trail, which could easily lead to the USSR being accused of provocation. But Petrov assures him that everything was planned this way and there will be no international conflict. At that moment, his daughter calls and he rushes home. The squad members reach the castle and, splitting up, begin to explore the premises. Meanwhile, Petrov finds Vera in a hysterical state. She is going mad with worry for her husband, and the father decides to take action. At the same time in the castle, Katerina reads a book to the children, and seeing her nervousness, they calm the woman. She orders lights out and leaves, just as Ivan enters the hall from the other side. Seeing the children in front of him, the man lowers his weapon and leaves. The children remain motionless. The soldiers continue to explore the castle, and now the squad leader enters the hall with the children. But he does not lower his weapon and prepares to shoot. Then the children attack first. The commander fires in all directions, but the teenagers throw their clothes at him and knock him down. The eldest orders the pistol handed to Baruch to kill the enemy, but the boy cannot shoot the man, and the man manages to wound him with a knife before being killed. The children carry the bleeding Baruch to the bedroom, leaving the soldier's body on the hall floor. The 3rd squad member, a female warrior, finds Katerina's office and engages her in a shootout. Katerina flees, but the woman catches up to her, and they fight. The woman is defeated when Katerina pushes her away. Seeing her opponent unconscious, the German grabs a pistol but doesn't manage to shoot because Ivan appears. Threatening him with a pistol, the woman captures him. In Moscow, Petrov brings his daughter to Professor Lyubov and asks her to erase the girl's memory. Lyubov is outraged by this request, as the love for a husband is the most precious thing in Vera's life. However, under military pressure, she agrees and performs the necessary manipulations, while Petrov's subordinates methodically clear their apartment of photographs and items belonging to Ivan. But one photograph falls under a chest of drawers, and the soldier does not notice it. After the procedure, the girl regains consciousness but does not remember her husband at all. At this time, the teenagers attack Ivan, not noticing Katerina, and wound him in the arm. The woman drives off the aggressive children and escorts the wounded man to Neumann's office, where she admits to Ivan that she recognized him because she had seen him in Madrid. He asked why her master kidnapped Anya. Could it be that he wants to use her in the war? Katerina assures him that he still doesn't understand. People are petty and greedy creatures fighting for power. Neumann is unique. He is ready to seize all power on Earth to save the world from war. Meanwhile, Neumann and Anya arrive at the castle and find a wounded woman on the threshold. The scientist finishes her off with a pistol while Anya runs to the bedroom to the teenagers and finds Baruch dead. At this time, Ivan is bandaging himself while Katerina explains that they teach the children survival by developing their skills, because their destiny is to save the world under Neumann's leadership. The woman offers to help him escape if he will help her, but before Ivan can hear her out, Neumann enters the door. The Russian immediately picks up a pistol and takes the woman hostage. However, the German informs him that he does not care about her fate, which visibly upsets her. At that moment, Anya runs into the office and uses her power to knock Ivan off his feet, but when she recognizes the man, Neumann quickly takes her away, leaving the Russian with Katerina. In Moscow, Professor Lyubov mourns Ilyinsky when Petrov brings her folders with the names of the condemned, whom she can save by including them in Squad M. She remembers how after the accident, Ilyinsky came to her in the hospital. The man was shocked to learn that she had been mutilated by the military, but he was frightened and could not refuse to cooperate. Now the woman is alone and forced to make difficult decisions. She takes out a vial of M activator and recalls Ivan's story about the man in the mask. After his return from Madrid, she worked with his memory, suggesting removing the traumatic memories of his comrades' deaths, but Ivan refused to erase his life. And now the young man is chained in a cell in the castle of the man in the mask. Later, Anya visits him, accusing him of killing Baruch, but the boy denies it, and he is not particularly interested in her fate. He only wants to destroy Neumann because all evil comes from him. He hypnotizes children, turning them into killers. Their conversation is interrupted by Naumann's appearance. After sending Anya away, he thanks the young man for revealing his vulnerability, as he is the only one who could stand up to him. To prove it, the scientist shows the finger shot off by Ivan in Madrid. He too is special, and Neumann really wants the Russian to join his side. Yes, he killed his friends, but it was war. He came to Ananurba to find gifted people. Anya is like him, and they are the future. He asks Ivan to admit why he is immune to his hypnosis. Then Ivan reveals that there is a whole squad like him. Squad M. There are many of them, and they will all be here soon. So Neumann cannot hide. After talking with Ivan, Neumann finds Anya in the castle's backyard. The girl asks him to hand over all affairs to Katerina and to leave this place forever. But Neumann does not want to run because they are extraordinary people, and when they are together they are unbeatable. He asks for her help in defending their new home. Later he thanks Katerina for managing the situation and confesses that he is glad she was not hurt during the Russian raid. Meanwhile, Anya remembers how in Moscow she wrote letters to her brother while locked up in the laboratory. She used to give them to the professor, but she could not have imagined that he read her letters to Peter, who was undergoing mental processing as a participant in Squad M. At this time she burns them in the backyard of the castle, hoping that life will give her a chance to start over. Later, the castle's inhabitants conduct a funeral rite for Baruch. The teenagers carry the boy's body to the seashore, where the cemetery is located, and burn it on a ritual pyre. Anya is shocked by the number of children's graves and realizes that Ivan was telling the truth. Katerina urges her to leave and save herself. Anya runs to Ivan's cell and asks him to tell her what he saw in Madrid that was so special. The boy talks about the death of his comrades and Neumann's chilling whisper, but the German doesn't know that he just had a misfire. He is not special and survived only because of the pistol's malfunction, but if Neumann finds out, he will kill him immediately. And only Anya can stand up to him. Out of the darkness comes Katerina, who has heard everything. She will let them go if they leave forever. Neumann is planning to sell the children to Canaris, and Anya can do nothing about it. They are weapons, and it is high time the Russian understood this. But Anya runs away while Katerina frees Ivan from his chains and advises him to make sure the German never finds them. Meanwhile in Moscow, Petrov enjoys his daughter's good mood, hoping she will meet another man, marry, and give him grandchildren. The girl is lively and cheerful, unaware that the photo under the dresser awaits its moment. At this time, Neumann orders the Russian man to be killed, and he goes to look for Anya. Meanwhile, Katerina leads Ivan to her car, where Neumann's guard catches up with them. He engages in a fight with the Russian, and when he is about to kill him, Katerina attacks the guard. The guard is much stronger, and Katerina has to shoot. The teenagers hear the sound and run into the courtyard while Katerina puts Ivan in the car and drives him away from the estate. Neumann finds Anya at the cemetery. The girl asks him to let the children go, but he refuses. They are insignificant to him because he hopes to build a new world using their combined powers. Moreover, they will definitely have a son who will be the strongest and greatest on the planet. Hearing this, Anya wants to leave. Then Neumann sees Katerina's car and realizes what she is about to do. He puts on his quantum mask, which greatly amplifies the power of his voice, and begins to speak while Ivan stands on the car step and aims an assault rifle at him. The mask works. Katerina's car loses control and crashes from a high cliff into the water, but Ivan manages to jump from the step and survives. Then, members of the second squad M, who were heading to the castle, covering for the distracting maneuvers of the first squad, open fire on Neumann, but the soldiers are programmed for total destruction, and one of them engages in a fight with Ivan, not realizing he is an ally. The young man has to kill the soldier. Neumann asks Anya to activate her power, and the girl begins to do so when she recognizes one of the soldiers as her brother. Neumann is knocked down by her force, rocks crash from the sky, and the girl runs to Peter, realizing that this time he is indeed dead. Anya's powers activate again when Neumann falls from Ivan's shot. The girl mourns her brother as teenagers appear on the road. Ivan grabs Anya and drags her away while the children pick up Neumann's body and carry it into the castle. The Russians run to the airplane and manage to take off at the last moment. 9 months later, Neumann, who survived the injury, listens to Hitler's speeches and experiments with a new kind of influence on people, broadcasting his voice through radio equipment. Meanwhile, in Anya's native village, a bearded Ivan arrives from the woods as his woman is about to give birth. Pregnant Anya is dragged into the village where women come to help. As the birth proceeds, an announcement about the start of the war with Germany is broadcast from the speakers. Later, surrounded by streams of power, Anya gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Neumann is immediately informed by a fortune-telling girl. Then one of the villagers recognizes Anya and hurries to tell his fellow villagers whom they have just helped. But Ivan stops him when bombers appear in the sky, from which a large number of paratroopers descend.